Good evening and welcome to this digitally enabled online meeting of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth, held on Monday, July 19th, 2021. I'm Mayor Todd Kasenberg and I'll call this meeting to order. I ask the Deputy Clerk to note our starting time for the minutes as 7 p.m. We wish to acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe peoples. We wish to recognize the long history of Indigenous peoples in Canada and show our respect to them today. We recognize their stewardship of the land. May we all live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship. Tonight's meeting is being streamed live on the Municipality of North Perth YouTube channel and will be available there after the meeting as an archived video. Anyone who is invited to speak will be recorded and their voice, image, and comments will form part of the live stream. The chair and/or the clerk have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances where deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory, or potentially inappropriate to be published. Thank you. Welcome to those joining us via the YouTube channel tonight and in subsequent nights. In fact, welcome to councillors, staff, and delegations who will participate in this meeting. We appreciate your time. At this time, I do invite your decorum over the course of the coming meeting. I advise that I have attendance regrets from Deputy Mayor Kellum. I also was advised that perhaps one of our councillors was to be late. Has that been confirmed at this point? So Councillor Johnston is not in attendance at the present time, but is expected to join the meeting at some point a little later. Now let's move first then to item 2.1 of our agenda pertaining to pecuniary interest. For the benefit of those who are unfamiliar with our council practices, provincial legislation requires councillors with a potential pecuniary or financial interest in any item at the council table to declare this interest and to remove her or himself from discussions and voting on the item. In accordance with recommended protocol at this time, I invite all councillors with perceived pecuniary interest, including those who have already declared in writing, to verbally advise the chair in public session, and if not already done, to submit documentation to this effect in writing to the clerk. Councillors are further reminded that should a potential conflict arise during the meeting, they may so declare and act at any point in the meeting. Let's begin tonight with Councillor Anstett. Councillor Anstett, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg. Through you this evening, I'd like to declare a pecuniary interest on item 5.5.1, the accounts, specifically the daycare, as my son attends the St. Mary's daycare, and also on item 13.1, the confirmatory bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anstett. Next up is Councillor Behrens. Welcome, Councillor Behrens. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg. Through you, I will declare a pecuniary conflict of interest on items 5.5.1, 5.7.4, and 13.1. I have grandchildren attending the North Perth Spinrite Child and Family Center, including other programs, and my daughter and son-in-law have property on the Reed Municipal Drain in Wallace Ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Behrens. Any other councillors wishing to make a declaration at this time? We're not seeing any indication of same, so let's explain our virtual processes. Tonight, I'll be systematically trying to seek consent from various councillors as movers and seconders of the various resolutions and bylaws that will be put before us. I will do this to some degree alphabetically. Should a councillor not wish to respond to the request, they may say so, and I will move to the next name on the alphabetical list. Regarding speaking to our business, councillors tonight will identify themselves through our conferencing technologies chat function. The clerk is assisting me tonight in maintaining the speaking order from that source. Councillors are allowed on their turn to deliver a primary question or comment and may make one supplemental without intervention from me. We will follow speaking order carefully, and any councillor wishing to have a second say beyond that supplemental will have to indicate again and go to the bottom of the list. This is a normal process consistent with Robert's Rules of Order. Councillors are reminded that if I believe you're not audible, I will call on you Let me do that. Councillors are further asked to maintain a mute state in the web conference until I have called upon you for a verbal reaction. Should any of your votes not show up in eScribe, our voting technology, I will call on you when things do seem stalled to register a manual vote. At that time, take yourself off mute, answer yes or no on the motion, and then return to a mute state. Regarding our business, let's begin with item 2.2 of our agenda. I have a motion before me for the adoption of the agenda that reads quite simply that the agenda for tonight's meeting be approved. Can I call on Councillor Richardson to serve as our mover for this one?
I will move that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rothwell, will you be our seconder?
Yes, I will.
Thank you very much. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. That brings us to item number 3 on our agenda, the so-called consent agenda. These items are placed on our agenda because they are believed to be non-contentious, yet they require council's recognition and or action. Grouping them expedites our business. However, any councillor wishing to extract an item from the consent agenda for discussion, debate, and individual action may do so. There are 3 items on our consent agenda tonight, including the minutes of our last regular council meeting. Councillors, do any of you have a desire to extract any of these items for further discussion or action? Are you seeing anything, Clerk Barefelds? Okay. So we're not seeing anything at this end. So I'll read the resolution into the record then, that consent items 3.1 to 3.3 be received for information, and the minutes of the July 5th, 2021 regular council meeting be adopted. Councillor Seiler, will you serve as our mover for that one?
I will. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Andreessen, will you be our seconder?
Yes, second that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate on this one? We're not seeing any, so let's have that vote. And we lost the voting display. The vote showing in progress at this point. I'm not seeing a sort of wrap up to it. We're having a little bit of technical difficulty in the council chamber related to the display of votes. Deputy Clerk Beer, are you seeing the results of the vote?
Yes, I am. All have voted in favor of the motion.
Thank you. So we'll call that carried. Thank you very much. I think perhaps the clerk needs a moment to refresh the screen. So I'm going to proceed with our plan here. Our plan is that we move to agenda item number 4. This evening, we have an opportunity to conduct a public meeting related to the proposed amendment to the North Perth zoning bylaw instigated by parties Buchanan and 2157854 Ontario Inc., and intending to adjust the zoning classification of a portion of lands which currently contains a single detached dwelling in Elma Ward. I have a resolution for the purposes of temporary adjournment of regular council to hold a public meeting that reads as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth adjourns at 7:09 p.m. for the purpose of public meetings under the Planning Act concerning the following: an application for a zoning bylaw amendment affecting property located 302 Woodview Drive in Atwood. Can I call on Councillor Anstett to be our mover for this?
Yes, I would move that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Behrens, will you serve as a seconder?
Yes, I will second that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate on this? Our action will take us out of regular council and into a public meeting. We're wondering if e-scribe, so Clerk Bearfelds is saying proceed. So let's have that vote. Keeping my fingers crossed. I'm seeing it. That's a good sign. And that is coming through. That's good. We're missing someone. And there we go. And so with that vote, that is carried. That means we are temporarily adjourned for the purposes of a public meeting pursuant to the Planning Act for a proposed amendment to the North Perth zoning bylaw. I welcome all those who have joined us this evening for this purpose. This is a statutory public meeting pursuant to the Ontario Planning Act to deal with an application for an amendment to the North Perth zoning bylaw submitted by 2157854 Ontario Inc. Correspondence, reports, and comments received regarding this application will be considered by council. Those in attendance remotely wishing to make a comment concerning this application will be given an opportunity to do so. Anyone wishing to appeal council's decision must make verbal submission during this public meeting or have made a written submission to the council. Those who want to receive notice of the municipality's decision concerning this application must notify the clerk by email or telephone, giving their mailing address and telephone number. This is the point in the meeting where we invite the planning team to tell us a little bit more about this application and amendment. And I believe we have Mr. Sean Yilmaz, the County of Perth planner, who's dedicated to North Perth files, online with us tonight. Welcome, Mr. Yilmaz.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Kasenberg, members of council. The public meeting tonight is to discuss a proposed amendment to the North Perth zoning bylaw, which will rezone the area around the existing house on the subject property from the future development zone to the residential 4 zone. The application is actually related to a consent application that has been submitted concurrently and is expected to be discussed later this evening. The discussion of the consent application is necessary to provide context for this application for a zoning bylaw amendment. The consent application is seeking to remove the existing house from the larger property, which is located at 302 Woodview Drive in Atwood. The zoning bylaw amendment is necessary to permit the proposed severance to create a new lot, as lands within the current future development zone or FD zone cannot be severed. The subject lands are a large, irregular shaped property containing the existing single detached dwelling, as well as a barn, which is used for storage, and cultivated farmland. The subject land is located at the eastern edge of Atwood, with a portion of the subject lands within the Atwood settlement area boundary. The balance of the property is located outside the settlement area boundary and is within the agricultural designation and the natural resource environment designation of the County of Perth official plan. These lands in the agriculture designation and the natural resource environment designation are not affected or impacted by the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. The subject lands have a total lot area of approximately 5.7 hectares or 14 acres, with approximately 2 hectares or 5 acres within the settlement area boundary. The proposed amendment applies to an area of approximately 3,100 square meters or 0.77 acres, which are within the settlement area and subject to the settlement area policies. The subject lands currently have approximately 20 meters or 66 feet of existing public road frontage, which abut the northerly terminus of Woodview Drive, or the dead end. This frontage is also the only public road access to the property. The application for the proposed severance was submitted with a proposed lot layout which does not include any public road frontage or direct access to a public road, which is a requirement of the County of Perth official plan and will be spoken to in greater detail later tonight. Staff noted to the applicant that the public road does have the ability, Woodview Drive does have the ability to extend northward and ultimately provide public road frontage and access. It was discussed that the road should extend a sufficient distance to provide both appropriate driveway to the property, which will give direct access and frontage. We had discussed 3 meters as a potential appropriate distance to accommodate a new driveway. The property owner, however, is suggesting that the existing access driveway be used, which is located on the north side of the dwelling. And however, as a result of the severance, the access will cross over another property and will consequently not have direct access with a public road. The applicant is proposing to register an easement over the retained lands to provide the access to the severed lot. Section 16.3.2.5 of the County of Perth official plan requires that new lots created by consent must front on and have access to a public road, which is maintained on a year-round basis. During a final review of the proposal, it was noted that the access to a public road was not achieved if an access agreement is utilized. It was also noted that if the existing driveway was to be used, the road could be extended to full length and ultimately provide appropriate road frontage and access to the public road. A condition of consent is included with the recommendation that would aim to extend the public road and provide the access and frontage, and that will be spoken again later tonight. However, I think it's fair to note that the approach preferred by the applicant to extend the road 3 meters to offer the public road frontage and an access easement may be possible to achieve the desired outcome. However, from a planning perspective, staff's recommendation is based on an approach that provides the cleanest severance, avoiding issues with access in the future. However, this may not be the most convenient for the applicant. And I just feel it's important to note that to council. Now, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, which is being spoken to tonight and having this public meeting, is ultimately impacted by the nature of the approved severance, as the current draft amendment places the area of land proposed for the severance into the R4 zone, but does not include any special provisions recognizing a deficient lot frontage requirement. If the application for consent is approved with the condition that the road only needs to be extended 3 meters, this bylaw needs to be revised to include a special provision recognizing the minimum lot frontage of 3 meters. The proposed zoning amendment is in conformity with the provincial policy statement. However, as a result of the contested consent condition by the applicant, staff feels that this application for a zoning bylaw amendment should be deferred until the conditions of the consent are finalized and we can capture the zoning properly. I also just want to note that a provision for the retained lands was missed in the wording of the bylaw drafted. The zoning should recognize the new lot area of the retained lands, as the zoning states that the minimum lot area for land in the future development zone must be the same as the date of the passing of the zoning bylaw. A revised copy of the bylaw wording has been drafted and sent to the clerk earlier this evening. However, the zoning schedule hasn't been updated yet. In any case, the recommendation from staff at this point is to defer the application, which is different than the original recommendation in the staff report. However, we feel based on what I've just spoken to, this would be the best course of action at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yilmaz. Can you provide us with notice of public meeting details?
Yes, absolutely. So notice was sent out by regular mail to everyone within 120 meters, every registered property owner, and a sign was posted at the property.
Thank you very much. And at this time, I'd like to hear a little bit about correspondence, comments, and any reports received to date. I believe that's the clerk. Okay, let me just set the AV so that we don't create a black hole.
I have not been in receipt of any correspondence in regards to the zoning bylaw amendment application. However, in conversation today with the agent, I was in receipt of a PowerPoint presentation, which at the applicable time I will provide to North Perth Council.
Thank you, Clerk Schultz. So that brings us to the open forum part of our meeting. At this time, there's opportunity for those in attendance who wish to make a comment to do so. First, let's hear from any who are in attendance who support the application besides the applicant. Clerk Berfelds, are you aware of anyone who's made an intent for that purpose? No. Okay. So next we call on any who are in attendance who are opposed to the application. This is your opportunity to speak. Clerk Berfelds, have we had any indication of that? She's indicating no to me in the chamber. And finally, opportunity for the applicant or the applicant's agent to make comment. Do they intend to avail themselves of that opportunity tonight, Clerk Berfelds? Thank you. So Mr. Patterson, I'm told, is in attendance on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Patterson, did you wish to make comments on this to council?
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. As noted by Ms. Bearfelds, I do have a PowerPoint presentation for you this evening. The PowerPoint presentation speaks to both the zone change and the consent application, so I trust that's acceptable to proceed at this time.
Yes, we're giving confirmation, yes.
Okay. Next slide, please, Pat. So as noted by Mr. Yilmaz, we've submitted applications to create a new lot for the existing single detached dwelling and an easement to recognize the existing driveway location to ensure access is provided to that lot. The rezoning for the area of the existing house was requested to an R4 zone from the FD zone, and this is to recognize the new lot area. Applications were submitted concurrently on April 26, 2021. For one member of the group to purchase the severed lot, the others, and make this residence. The remaining lands will remain as is in their current condition until such time as the county completes the review process and it is confirmed what land is in and what land is out of the settlement boundary. We have requested that all of the lands be brought in. Next slide, please, Pat. So for the purposes of context, the green line on your screen is the current settlement boundary, the eastern limit of Atwood. The lands outlined in red comprise the entire Buchanan property. The lands on the right side of the green line with the A and the NRE2 zone are currently outside of the settlement boundary limit. And the lands on the left side of the green line, zoned FD, are inside the settlement boundary limit. And as noted, the area we seek to sever from that property is the hatched area, which would receive the R4 zoning. Also for context, the area in blue with the blue star is the proposed road connection that was contemplated through the approval of the Dahlner subdivision. And through the fullness of time, we're hoping that the county will support the inclusion of all of the Buchanan lands that will see a road through this area, the extension of Woodview Drive, and a connection up to that proposed road connection in the Dahlner subdivision. Next slide, please, Pat. So as noted by Sean, our submission was to sever basically the area outlined in yellow, recognizing the existing house, and that the area in green dash would be subject to an access easement to recognize the location of the existing driveway. I would note that, as you can see, the driveway proceeds to the north and wraps around to the north end of the existing dwelling because that is where the existing garage is and the existing garage door. Next slide, please. So as Sean had noted, in early June, staff had indicated a concern with the proposed lot not having frontage onto a public street. To rectify this issue, we agreed to a conveyance of a portion of land of approximately 3 meters by 20 meters at the end of Woodview Drive to the municipality of North Perth that would serve as the property frontage for the new lot. The corresponding R4 zoning of the new lot would need to address the reduced lot frontage amount of 3.0 meters. So it'd be a site-specific R4 zoning to recognize that. At that time, it was also confirmed that no road improvements or extension of Woodview Drive would be required. Next slide, please. So the result of that would be the area outlined in blue would be the portion of the private lands that would be conveyed to the municipality of North Perth, opened by bylaw and become part of the public road allowance. This would allow the severed lot to actually have frontage, be it 3 meters, but it would still have frontage onto a public road allowance. But it was still our intent that access to the property would be provided by an easement through the area in green outline to recognize the existing driveway so they could get to the north end of the existing house and the existing garage. Next slide, please. On Thursday of last week, being July 15th, I was notified that the county had changed their position and are suggesting conditions in a manner that would require a much larger conveyance of up to 60 meters by 20 meters. And as noted and seen on the previous slide, the previous indication was 3 meters by 20 meters. In addition, they are requesting that the landowner enter into a development agreement to extend Woodview Drive and incur the cost of doing so. Naturally, there would be a cost to have the development agreement prepared and registered on title. There would be a significant cost to prepare drawings, seek approvals, and construct an extension of Woodview Drive and post securities, wait out the maintenance period before the municipality would actually accept any new road construction. And as noted, staff had previously confirmed that no road improvements were required. And if this goes forward, suggested in their conditions, it would make the severance uneconomical and unviable at this time. Next slide, please. So as noted, this was not conveyed to us prior to the conditions being finalized and included in the staff report. The landowners were not made aware of this change that could result in significant costs. And what I've said here is just an example of $2,000 to $4,500 per meter of road, which equates to the potential for $120,000 to upwards of $270,000 in road construction costs. It is our opinion that road construction is premature until the fate of all of the remaining lands is known. And given past precedents, we are unsure why the provision of secure access via an easement to recognize the existing driveway is not appropriate. Next slide, please, Pat. And when I speak of past precedent, I draw your attention to this example. These are lands within the Listowel ward. They're in the northeast corner of Listowel. And as you can see by the yellow lines, there has been the creation of lots that have minimal frontage onto a public roadway, in this case, Alder Street, with access via easement over a private driveway. So in this instance, there's multiple lots that have frontage, minimal frontage, and have access through easement. And in our proposal, we're only requesting to recognize the existing driveway and have that recognized through an easement. So we're a little, to say the least, flabbergasted when we read the conditions last week and saw that our proposal was not being supported, and yet things like this have been supported by staff through previous applications. Next slide, please. So as I had noted, development applications will be forthcoming for the remainder of the lands, hopefully when the county official plan process is complete. We can then determine whether we're working solely with the lands that are inside the settlement boundary today, or whether the county agrees to the expanded settlement boundary area to include all of the Buchanan lands. Development for the remainder of the lands, in my opinion, is the appropriate time to conduct road design and incur the cost for construction and conveyance. These costs can then be borne by the overall project. An easement, as we proposed, secures access rights for the existing house over the existing driveway in perpetuity to ensure that the access remains. And I would note that the owner of the severed lot remains part of the ownership group of the larger parcel. There's no reason to believe that the easement can't be released at the appropriate time and that Woodview Drive will be extended as needed. Next slide, please. So as such, we would respectfully ask council to modify the R4 zoning for the proposed lot to recognize a minimum lot frontage of 3 meters. And in listening to Mr. Yilmaz's presentation, I have no concerns with the modification to recognize the existing lot area for the retained lands as well. We would request that North Perth Council recommend a revision to condition number 7 of the proposed conditions to identify that the lands be conveyed are roughly 3 meters by 20 meters, as originally agreed upon with staff, and that those lands area will be confirmed by an Ontario land surveyor. And we would ask North Perth Council to recommend to Land Division Committee that condition number 8, which is the condition requiring a development agreement and the extension of Woodview Drive, and be removed, and that North Perth supports the provision of services and access to the proposed lot via easement or right-of-way as per the severance sketch. Next slide, please. The applications have been submitted and in process since April of this year. As of early June, we fully believe we were in agreement with staff and that we would be appearing tonight in full support of the staff report and recommendations. And as noted, these matters came to light on Thursday of last week. These conditions could result in hundreds of thousands of dollars in cost to these landowners simply to create a lot for an existing house. It is our opinion that the conveyance of the small portion of 3 meters by 20 meters of land resolves the frontage issue identified by the county, and that's why we agreed to that, and that the recognition of the existing driveway and securing that access via easement right-of-way is suitable and meets the intent of the county official plan. It also follows examples that staff and county have also previously approved per the example that I showed you earlier. If council supports the current staff position, it's quite simple that we cannot proceed and because there's no economic way that this can be completed at this time. Next slide, please. The owner who wishes to make this their residence is awaiting conclusion of these matters so that they can proceed with the transaction to purchase the lot and make the necessary upgrades to the home. They are now facing previously unknown costs of significant magnitude and potential delays. As noted, we're now hearing that the zoning may be deferred while this is resolved. I respectfully request that North Perth Council make the requested amendment to the zoning and make the recommendation to the Land Division Committee to modify condition number 7 of the consent and remove condition number 8 and support access to the new lot by easement. We do not wish for a deferral or further delays on these matters and need to progress so that the proponent can make use of the existing house. Next slide, please. So in final summary, the end result of what we're proposing is that the new lot outlined in yellow would be created. The portion in blue would be conveyed to the municipality of North Perth, opened as road allowance, thus meeting the frontage requirement for the new lot. Through discussions with staff, we were led to believe that no road improvements would be required for the area in blue, other than they wish to work with us on snow removal, which we're happy to do, and that permanent access for the time being until the remainder of the area in red comes forward is granted via easement in the area outlined in green over the existing driveway in its current condition to get to the north end of the house where the existing garage is. I personally don't believe it's viable to suggest that a new access or new driveway can be created to the area in blue, just given the orientation of the existing house, where the garage is, and the functionality of doing that. So if there's any questions, I believe that's my final slide. If there's any questions or concerns, I'd be happy to answer them. But we would request that North Perth work with us on this to try and bring this forward in a suitable manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. This is the opportunity now then for council to ask questions. Councillors, any questions about all that you've heard tonight on this one? Please indicate if you have a question in the chat function. Councillor Barron's first.
Thank you. Good evening, Scott. I read your report that was included in the package. Am I understanding correctly that the only reason this zoning is required is because of the Buchanans want to sever the lot, correct? Otherwise, they wouldn't need any of this. The owner can still utilize the house. He can still build his accessory building, etc. The only reason that this is required is because they want to move to sever this lot from the bulk of the other lands.
Through you, Mayor Kasenberg, yes, that is correct. One of the property owners, one of the Buchanans, wishes to utilize this as their personal residence. In order to do so and to clean up, so to speak, between the three property owners, they wish to create the lot for the existing house. Basically, he would buy it from the overall group, but still participate in the larger project. And the FD zoning does not recognize the creation of a new lot. It only recognizes the zoning or the lot area, sorry, for what is there today. So the rezoning is required to give that portion the R4 zone. And then the rest of the lands would stay FD and need that special recognition that Sean had noted for the new lot area that results.
Any other questions from council? Okay. So thank you all for your participation. Notice of the decision will be given in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. Council's decision is subject to appeal to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. And with that, we can bring to a general close this public meeting. I have a resolution to formally bring us back into regular council and to adjourn this public meeting that reads as follows: that the public meeting for the purpose of a Planning Act application is now adjourned at 7:36 p.m. and that council reconvene into regular open council. Councillor Duncan, will you serve as mover for this one?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you. Is Councillor Johnston with us at this hour? Councillor Johnston, please.
Yes,
welcome.
yes, he is, and I would second that.
Thank you very much. Any discussion or debate? Let's have that vote.
As Councillor Ant said, I'm in favor. My e-scribe's not working. I'll restart.
Yeah, mine has failed too, so just.
I'm also, I'm in favor to restart.
Okay, maybe we need to roll call this one. I don't know, because I'm also out. It booted me too. So who do we have showing voted? Well, I'm going to be completely out. We have 3 showing as voted at this point.
Councillor Andreessen here. I'm not able to vote, but I'm in favor.
Okay, so Councillor Andreessen is in favor. Councillor Anstedt, you have been recorded as voting yes.
Yes, that's correct.
Councillor Barnes,
Yes.
thank you.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Richardson, thank you. Councillor Rothwell has voted. Councillor Seiler, do we have his vote?
I'm in favor.
Okay, thank you. And have I missed any other member of council that's not showing up on the list?
Councillor Johnston's in favor.
Councillor Johnston, thank you. And I'll declare that I'm in favor as well. So with that, we're carried. Give me a moment, council, to try to log back into eScribe. I'll give you the same moment. Okay, seems to have reloaded. That's good news. Sorry. All right, so that brings us forward next then to bringing council back into session. We are officially back into our regular meeting. Thank you all for your participation again in the public meetings. I don't think we're bringing forward immediately resolutions associated with that matter, are we? Anything further? Okay. Okay, so we're just sort of checking on procedure here at council. We're going to turn to Mr. Yilmaz just for a query. We know that there's this zoning bylaw amendment before us. It has been reviewed, of course, now through public meeting. We assume that the preference is that we do these 2 things in order, with the severance recommendation considered first, later in the meeting, and then we add to that item the bylaw amendment request. Does that sound right to you?
Yes, correct. I think that would work well. And if we need to do any revisions at that point, we could, or council could,
Okay.
if that was the intent.
So I'll make a little bit of an executive decision, so that we're just going to push those things together a little bit later in the meeting when there's a dedicated session for that purpose. That allows us to move forward. On we go. Tonight, we're really excited. I'm really excited to have a delegation with us. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Leith Deacon, who is a professor at the University of Guelph. He's been around our communities a lot in the last year. He's been actively engaged in understanding the impact of COVID-19 on rural communities and rural resilience is his expertise. He's presented his results from a very strong survey to a number of organizations in our area already to date. And we're just really glad to have him with us tonight to present to this council. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Leith Deacon, who will share with us some of the findings from his rural resilience survey. Welcome, Leith.
Thank you very much, Mayor Todd. I really appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. I'll just share my screen, hopefully really fast, and it should. I hope everybody can see this. So this is my first time on this this device here today, this type of meeting. So hopefully it all works. And if it isn't, can someone just say that you can see this? Yeah, everything seems fine. Are you seeing full screen? I have no idea. So yeah, I see a head nod.
Yeah, we're sort of seeing the speaker notes page, but it works.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I can see if I can do anything about it. Probably not. I mean, it's not a big deal. Let's see if I can just do something really fast here to get rid of it. Yeah, I don't know. Swap displays. Oh, how's that?
There we go. You've got it.
Yeah. So there's two screens going on.
A promising career in IT.
No, there's not. Okay, so thanks so much for inviting me to be here today. And as was said, I've spent the last, I guess it's been, well, the original survey was launched back in early September of 2020. So we've been diving pretty deep into some of the rural response to COVID-19. And what I'm going to share today is some of those results, a little bit of justification why we're looking specifically at rural or small town areas, what the next steps are. And then I really want to open this up to some questions. So the first thing I always like to say is I like to start by covering is why am I looking at rural? And I mean, ultimately, it's because rural places and small communities have been neglected. This neglect is a symptom of politics, of voting seats, and of population. And while 82% of Canadians live in non-rural locations, that still leaves about 8.3 million of us that live in these smaller communities. That being said, I, for one, think it's critical that everyone should be able to see themselves in policy, not simply the folks that live in Ottawa or Toronto or Vancouver. Why? I think it's important that urban residents are absolutely are absolutely able to see themselves in policy, but so are we. So are the individuals that live in these rural places. Why? Well, ultimately because rural places are different, and not because they're better, not because they're special, just simply because they are different. The demographics within rural communities are often significantly different than their urban counterparts. Often, for example, we have a greater percentage of older residents, so ideas around concepts like mobility are super critical. We're isolated digitally. We have a lack of broadband service. We have a lack of medical specialists. And of course, physically, we are simply far away from major urban centers. COVID has brought attention to the implications of these factors on mental health of all Canadians, but the experiences of rural Canadians are unique. And that is ultimately why I'm looking at this. I imagine that many of the people on the call have heard the saying, if you've been to one rural place, you've been to one rural place. One of my colleagues, Wayne Caldwell, who some of you may know, says this quite often. And I think there's some strengths to that saying, but I don't subscribe to it. There are commonalities between rural places, but there are also local nuances. Rural is not a monolith. Rural is not only agriculture, it is so much more than agriculture. Farming is important, but so are the small artisan shops, butchers, plumbers, and the rural schools. And we as rural Canadians need to have our voice heard. And the best way to get that voice out there is through reliable, valid data collection. We need to ensure that our opinions are heard and that they're relevant. And this process legitimizes our concerns by engaging with local populations. Therefore, there's an increased sense of buy-in from the communities. And that is exactly why I'm here today, to try to share some results and then have a discussion about what we have found. So the goal of this project, as you can see there on the screen, is looking at the experiences of residents from across 2 counties, Perth and Huron, related to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. And we're just going to highlight the value of local data collection. In consultation with the research team, an advisory group, a number of graduate students, we developed 5 objectives that you can see there also on your screen. Representatives included the NGO sector, local government, health units, local businesses. Additionally, I personally reached out to almost every single organization that would talk to me. Social services, Ontario Works, immigration groups, economic development, ag groups, and so forth. And the idea for me was to ensure that these objectives that you see on your screen resonated with the case study areas and make sure that they reflected not only what I think is interesting, but most importantly, what the folks that I'm asking these questions, asking to participate, also think are interesting. I'm going to present the data that came out of this quantitative survey, and I assume many people on the call tonight received this survey, or at least have heard about it. And the survey we spent a ton of time trying to develop it. I wanted to look at, as you can see, there are 5 sections that you can see. The first is demographics, because I wanted to be able to say to Leanne, for example, here are the findings for females under the age of 40 who make less than 50,000 who work in service. I wanted that level of granularity. So we spent a ton of time looking at things like demographics. And then we looked at individual well-being. And as you can see there, those are just 7 indicators of well-being taken from the Canadian Index of Well-being. And then we looked at social behavior. And those are some of the sample questions that you see there. What those questions are trying to get to is how have we moved? How do we move? Because I think it's really critical that small towns, rural areas recognize that COVID-19 has had a forever change on the way that we shop, the way that we do business. And we need to provide data to our local business owners that allow them to say to whoever their funding agencies are, you know, it could be the provincial government, the federal government, or other business organizations, and say, we need a little bit of help here. And then the next section is day-to-day living. And those questions were all about anxiety. Are we worried? What are we worried about? Is it food? Is it medication? Are we worried about ourselves, our friends, our family, our loved ones? And then the final one is planning and prep. And those were all about questions about developing a response plan. And those 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th sections were asked 3 times. We asked participants to answer those questions looking back before the start of the pandemic, since the start of the pandemic, and then we asked them to imagine looking forward after the pandemic, because we wanted to provide a little bit of data on snapshots, how things have changed. We worked super, super hard on getting the word out. I spoke on Listowel Radio. I spoke on Exeter Radio. I was on the CBC. I showed up in Listowel to answer questions face-to-face. And we ended up receiving about 3,600 completed surveys. So a huge amount of data, each survey with over 100 questions. So it did go very, very well. So let's present a little bit of that data. And I don't have time, obviously, to go through it all. So I just have kind of like cherry-picked a little bit of it. The first one is well-being, and well-being is something that I think is really critical because it kind of is, like I said, those 7 indicators. You can see them there on the bottom of your screen. So we asked participants, as I said, to self-evaluate well-being before COVID. And there's no numbers here. That's not the point. But I want to show you this is before and this is after. This is before and this is after. And all you can see when I do this are some trends, how things have changed. So this is before, now this is after. And what you can see is basically everything on the left-hand side of your screen, the excellent, the good, followed all the way by the poor on the right. You're getting a bigger change after towards the quote unquote bad responses, the poor, the satisfactory. And that's just giving you some trend ideas about how things are changing. Just as a note, on the far right-hand side, for the not applicable, the yellow question is asking employment satisfaction, so you can assume those individuals are retirees or don't work. And the blue is about retirement, so you can assume those individuals are working, just to clarify that. Let's go a little bit further on this data. So we asked about mental health, and mental health is something that has been and should be and needs to be covered more and more, specifically rural mental health. There was an article that came out before Christmas last year, specifically looking at men's mental health and the very high rate of suicide for rural men. So we wanted to have a little bit of information gathered about mental health before and after. So again, this is just looking at some trends, and you can see here the dark blue to the gray, you can see how things have changed. And what those numbers look like is, for example, after the start of the pandemic, there was a 45% decrease in respondents who indicated they had excellent mental health. On the flip side, there was a 75% increase in individuals who said they now had poor mental health. Okay, so that's interesting, but let's go a little bit further. Let's look at sex. As I assume everybody understands, sex is one of, if not the most important indicators of vulnerability. Women simply are more often precariously employed. They're more responsible for home, childcare, and generally they are paid less than their male counterparts. So we wanted to really drill down into sex to understand how COVID has been experienced by females. So what you're looking at here is the difference between men and women. Women are in blue, men are in orange. Everything is statistically significant. But what we saw is a 42% decrease in females who, after the start of the pandemic, said they had excellent mental health, 42% decrease. For men, it was a 5% decrease from that excellent category. Flipping it all the way to the poor category, big across both sexes, 67 and a 71% increase in that poor self-assessed for men and or self-identifying females and self-identifying males. The reason I want to highlight this is because it's really critical that, policy and programs reflect the realities. Self-identifying men, self-identifying women, intersex require a different response. One size does not fit all, and if females are being disproportionately impacted, as our data suggests, we need to make sure that our programs and our policies are adequate for that cohort. Now, the other thing that's super critical, age. So now we're looking just at females, and we're looking at under 40 years old. Why? As a little side, I remember when this all began, I asked my mom and my dad how they were coping through everything. My folks are 71, and my mom said, "You know what, Leif? Listen, your dad and I are fine. You've been retired for about 12 years. You and your sister are out of the house. We own our own house. I am more interested in understanding how young women are doing," she said, because she goes, "I just remember what it was like for me to be a young mom. That's a cohort that's super busy on a good day. Add this on top of them when they're trying to pay their bills. You really should start to look at that." And I said, "That's really interesting." And sure enough, when I pulled that out, young women under the age of 40 have been statistically significantly much more impacted by COVID-19. You've seen drastic decreases in that excellent self-assessment of their mental health, very significant increases in the poor. You're looking at nearly an 85% increase in females, self-identifying females under the age of 40 who now say after the start of the pandemic, they have poor mental health. Okay, so nearly an 85% increase. And I just think it's really important that governments, all levels, have spent a ton of time making sure that our seniors are taken care of, and I understand the physiological reason for that. That being said, the physiological impact on on adults across the age spectrum is different. There's a need to recognize the mental health impacts, and young females have been impacted much more significantly, and it needs to be recognized in our policies and our programs. Moving along, I just want to highlight a little bit of stuff about housing, because I was interested to know some information about how housing is related to this. Everybody understands that our housing markets have gone super bananas during COVID. How has that kind of impacted our mental health, our physical health, and so forth? So this is just where people live. As you can see, the majority of folks across Perth County either own with or without a mortgage. But we wanted to see if there was a correlation between that group that don't own. So let's look at the renters with or without utilities, for example, or no shelter, or the other groups. So basically, let's exclude the individuals that are in that traditional housing market. So we wanted to see about mental health, and we wanted to see if we look at only those who rent, including or excluding utilities, were disproportionately impacted. And what we found is a 54% decrease in this group of individuals who said they now had an excellent mental health, as well as a 73% increase in these groups, or in this group, who said they had poor mental health since the start of the pandemic. And what we're beginning to see is that there is a statistically significant relationship, or the layering of impacts of the pandemic, and how different types of vulnerabilities have been more significant in terms of housing or income type, and when layered, how they exacerbate one another. Okay, so this just really adds more validity to the argument. One size fits all doesn't work, and it's really critical that we recognize our most vulnerable populations. And we did the same for physical health, and I'm, I guess, happy to say, I guess is the word, that physical health did not show that's significant. We saw a decrease in excellent and an increase in poor, but not at all in the same significance. Okay, so I just wanted to also highlight that not everything is terrible. So why does local data matter? I'm not an advocate. I claim to be a data scientist. I'm a researcher, but I'm not an advocate. I collect data that can help those people that advocate. The data has already impacted local areas by securing funding for increased ambulatory care or for obtaining increased mental health supports, exposing gaps in the system. And I think it's really critical that local councils like you have this information so that you can recognize what your residents need, so that programs and policies can be passed and supported that really reflect the realities of your residents. I've given about 35 presentations now, maybe a dozen interviews, but the thread that weaves across each is that rural places, small communities, and the folks that live there matter. Their experiences matter. And when response plans are being funded and developed, it's critical that their voices are heard and reflected in the decisions that are made. So this is just a bit of a spattering of some of the news reports that have come out about the project. And in terms of what's next, I have received some funding, almost $250,000, to expand. And so I've already secured 6 counties, and we are going to tweak things. Inclusion of vaccination hesitancy is really critical for the health units. Inclusion of childcare, specifically for individuals who've been working at home. Addiction questions are critical to include as well as all of the qualitative methods. This has only been quantitative so far, so we're going to get out and start doing some interviews. We hope to get into the schools because kids obviously have been impacted as well. I'd like to thank a number of people, so you can see all the individuals listed specifically on the left, as well as Perth County, Huron County, the university, and so forth, and specifically Mayor Todd. He's been a huge advocate of this project since the beginning, and without his support and others like him, nothing would have come through. So that's where I'll wrap things up here, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. I'm also happy to share any information that people might need, and yeah. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Leith. Good to have you with us tonight. I know that Councillor Rothwell was very eager to have you report here, having heard, I believe, your presentation elsewhere, and certainly I think he's right on the money that this council deserves to hear this. So thank you very much. I'd entertain a few questions from councillors at this point, if there are some. Clerk Bearfelds, do we have anyone expressing interest? Okay, let's start with Councillor Andreessen.
Hi, thank you through you, Mayor Kasenberg, and thank you, Professor Leith for your presentation. I'm finding it very fascinating about how the needs of women have been really brought to the surface in this research. I'm wondering, as you move forward, certainly the information has shown us that housing is going to be really critical to support women and that age group. I'm wondering if you're thinking about adding additional questions that would find out more about what they need in terms of helping them with their mental health. I was wondering if you'd be drilling that down a little bit as you move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So generally, the way that I conduct all my research projects is I do the quantitative piece first, because that really allows me to say, you know what, I don't know, let's pick on Stratford. Stratford really has some concerns around men over the age of 65. So that would allow me to get into Stratford, develop a qualitative questionnaire that would make sure that those questions that I'm asking are pertinent to that locale. And I would do the same for North Perth. And so I'm able to split everything out geographically. and ensure that any follow-up questions are the ones that are the most important to that region. So if I do look at the Perth specific data, it does indicate to me that yes, sex across the board, no matter the location, is critical, and we need to make sure that there are follow-up questions geared towards the needs of self-identifying females, for example. But also within Perth County, what does secure housing mean? You know, are we able to find housing? How long did it take you? How much of your income is going, you know, all of those questions. So I guess to answer your question, yes, I think would be a quick and easy answer. It just, there's so much of those questions that are more personal, that are more contextually relevant. They don't lend themselves to a stat. So they lend themselves to a, hey, you know, Leanne, tell me about this experience, and allow that dialogue to happen. So yes, I have ethics clearance to do the qualitative component.
Thank you for that. Actually, just sort of a supplemental of my own along that path. I noted your new grant. Congratulations. With regards to sort of circling back into Perth and Huron County, is there an opportunity to do that, or are you moving on to the sort of next frontier?
So I right now it is 100% gearing up for this massive launch. I hope to put out simultaneously 140 to 180,000 surveys. So that requires my full attention, or else I'll drop many balls. So that is it. But once those surveys get launched, I want to circle back to revisit Huron, to revisit Perth, to start those questions. So that is absolutely the plan for the fall.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Rothwell, you're next.
Thanks, Mayor Todd, and thank you, Professor Deacon, to give your presentation to North Perth Council specifically and directly. I was a member of the COVID Recovery Action Group dealing with community services, and certainly some of our members were directly involved with you, Gwyneth in particular, for the Salvation Army, and I've spoken to her specifically, as well as the United Way, and their sincere appreciation for the fact that you did really roll up your sleeves and cared a lot about the rural communities and the impact of COVID on our societies. And I think it's crucial moving forward that we take this information as local municipalities as well as our agencies to move forward. So I'm glad we're not alone. I congratulate you as well on the additional funding you received for those other rural communities, and look forward to more information, more detailed information coming out there specifically. But again, I want to thank you for the presentation here this evening. There's a lot of crucial information for us to look at, and whether it's young, old, men, women, there's very specific issues that we need to address. Certainly schools with their children, and whether it's elementary school or secondary school, there's a lot of issues there, as well as our college and universities, and all the way through to our seniors and so on. Those are critical issues. But I will point out clearly a conversation that we had at the COVID Recovery Action Group on our community services to the issue that Councillor Andreessen talked about women in that 40 age group, 40 to 49, I think it was. And there's a saying about in the community or in families, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And this is, and we can laugh about it, but it is crucial. And I think that it's important that we sort of understand that so many things that we do as our families, whether small family or large, is community based. And it's when you interact in community, there's important issues that I'm sure are going to come out of this research in terms of the impacts of sports, of music or dance and so on. And it's the connections that are made of the parents as their children are doing things. So I think your work on the survey is going to highlight some of those. So thanks very much, Professor Deacon.
Thanks so much for that. So just as some background, I'm born and raised in Northern Ontario, and I'm from rural. I'm from General Store. That's how small we were, and I now live in Fergus. So this wasn't a stretch for me to be interested in this. It was super legitimate. Gwyneth in my opinion, is just like, you need as many Gwyneths as you possibly can get. She is just so fantastic for your community. She waves that flag so high. Ryan Erb and the others from the United Way are just bananas amazing. They're just incredible. And Susanna Reed at the time was there, and I think she's now a planner for the county, and she's just super incredible and was super critical. So without those networks, nothing would have happened. I can design you the best survey you've ever seen, but I can't get it into the hands of people. So without the support of those people, nothing ever happened. And the last thing I'll say about that is, I want to make sure that the data does end up in your hands, because I'm super lucky and I've got a position now that is secured. So if you guys need something, if there's a piece of information that you think, Leanne, I don't know, I'll just pick on you again, that you think this is the idea, then send me a personal email. I've put my contact information there, including my cell phone number. Feel completely comfortable to reach out to me anytime, and I can get data into your hands, because like I said, I don't want to advocate, but I want to help you advocate. So anybody, anytime, just send me an email or a call. But I mean, email might be easier.
Thank you very much. I think we heard a new word in the council chamber tonight, I guess, bananas. I like it. I think we could hear that word somewhat more frequently in our meetings. So my peers, thank you. You know, we're so appreciative for the work that you've done, and you know, we can highly commend to the other communities where you're embarking on a new adventure, your work to them, because it's very meaningful and very helpful to those like trying to make a difference in policy in our community. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. That made my glasses fog up, so I won't say bananas again. But anyway, thank you so much for your attention. And I mean, if there's more questions, I'm happy to answer them. But if there's no more time, then you guys can send me an email anytime.
Very good.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Yep, have a great evening, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
All right. With that, let's begin us with section 5 of our agenda. Okay, that's the last of the. For item 5.1, we'll hear from the CAO's department. We have, I think, one report tonight, and I don't think CAO Snell is with us. Oh, is he? He made it. Okay, so CAO Snell is traveling, but I guess he did come in. So for item 5.1.1, council is presented with a report from the CAO that addresses a made in the area approach to the formulation of a new detachment police services board for the OPP services that are delivered in North Perth, West Perth, and Perth East. The respective mayors and CAOs undertook a review of feasibility for models for this newly mandated board, which will wind down all previously existing police services boards for the creation of this new entity. Our report is a bit overdue, as I understand it, to the Solicitor General. They're not screaming too loudly yet. But the model being proposed has been crafted through discussion and consideration of the wieldiness of that detachment board in terms of managing things. So maybe CAO Snell, first of all, glad you're here. Welcome and offer any comments.
Thank you, Mayor Council. And I think I am stretching the Wi-Fi at my current location, so I will not have my video on tonight. But I just wanted to briefly add to what the mayor said. Of course, council is aware the Police Services Act is being replaced by the Community Safety and Policing Act. There are 3 things the ministry has to bring forward regulations on for the new act, and that is the detachment boards, which we're discussing tonight, the OPP Advisory Council, and OPP billing. The one thing I just want to add is we have been told by ministry staff that the detachment boards will not affect OPP billing or the way a municipality like North Perth can enter into contracts with the OPP. That will be something that's just done outside the board level. And as the mayor said, we did meet as CAOs and mayors about the structure of the new board, and we are recommending, based on several sort of drafts of what a board could look like, is option 2, which would be 1 council rep and 1 community rep from each of the 3 municipalities, with the 2 provincial reps making up their required percentage, and that we would be forwarding this on to the ministry for their approval in regulation. And I'll be prepared to answer any questions council may have.
Thanks, CAO Snell. Councillors, do you have any questions? All right. Okay, we have IT in the chamber. Councillors, those of you who are available and staff, can you hear me? First question.
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Richardson.
I can hear you.
Sorry? Okay, so people are hearing us. That's good. The transmission of audio is good. With regards to what you're seeing on your screen, are you currently seeing a report from Planner Yilmaz on your screen in WebEx?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, good. That's good, good. Has everyone logged into eScrat?
Yes, and you're being broadcast on YouTube as well. It's still live.
Okay, and I assume, Councillor Richardson, that our audio flow is also going to YouTube at this point?
That is correct.
Okay. I mean, you know, life is like this, right? Sometimes we have to troubleshoot the IT and make sure that each of the pieces is working. Okay, so we think everything is working at this point. The IT team is probably going to run some background tests just to make sure that internet speed and intermittency is okay. So let us proceed then, councillors. Let's return to the matters at hand. Thank you for your patience. To the audience on YouTube, thank you for your patience. We're hoping we have this resolved. So that brings us to item 5.2.2. And oh no, maybe I'm too far ahead. 5.2.1. Sorry, let's get there. 5.2.1 is the matter of rendering an opinion on an application for severance of a single-family dwelling from a larger lot on Woodview Drive in Atwood, as we heard during the public meeting, with staff suggesting that this council actually they changed their attitude about what council's action should be. So maybe we need to hear from Planner Yilmaz about where this matter stands at this point, and council can consider what was heard in the public meeting. So Mr. Yilmaz, I'll call on you first.
Thanks, Mayor Kasenberg. So yeah, this application for consent B1121 submitted to the County of Perth is associated with the proposed zoning bylaw amendment that we spoke to earlier tonight at the public meeting. So just a reminder, the application is seeking to sever the existing house from the property and ultimately create two separate lots, one containing the residential house. I'll try not to repeat too much of what has been said already, but to summarize, the subject lands have a total lot area of approximately 5.7 hectares or 14 acres, with approximately 2 hectares or 5 acres of the site within the settlement area boundary. The proposed severance, containing an existing residential use, is located within the entirely within the settlement area and encompasses 3,100 square meters or 0.77 acres of land. This area is also within the residential designation of the County of Perth official plan. The proposed severance is supported by staff, subject to a number of conditions, which I did speak to briefly, and is included briefly earlier, and is included in the recommendation. The conditions include a requirement for rezoning for the severed land out of the future development zone and into a residential zone. This was discussed earlier tonight at the public meeting and is noted as condition number 6 in the recommendation. Additionally, 2 conditions are included which effectively require the extension of Woodview to accommodate public road frontage and access to the proposed residential lot. This is noted as condition number 7 and condition number 8. The applicant has contested the conditions, particularly number 8, which requires a development agreement and any costs associated with the opening of the public road to be paid by the property owner, whereas condition number 7 requires a transfer of the lands for the purpose of a public road extension. The original proposal did not include public road frontage or access and included a suggested access easement. Section 16.3.2.5 of the County of Perth official plan requires that new lots created by consent must front on and have direct access, have access to a public road, which is maintained on a year-round basis. Woodview Drive does have the ability to extend northward and ultimately provide public road frontage and access. And this was discussed that the road should extend a sufficient distance to provide an appropriate driveway to the property, which will give direct access. As noted earlier, we have our staff have discussed with the applicant 3 meters as a potential appropriate distance to accommodate a new driveway. The property owner is suggesting that the existing access driveway be used, which is located at the north side of the dwelling. However, as a result of the severance, the access will cross over another property and will consequently not have direct public road access. The applicant is proposing to register an easement over the retained lands to provide access to the severed lands. The recommended conditions are based on an approach that provides a clean severance, avoiding issues with access should the lands transfer. However, this issue may be addressed through the proposed easement. The conditions include language that does not specifically identify a distance requirement for the extended road. However, the intent is that appropriate public road access and frontage are provided via the extension of Woodview Drive. The proposed preferred approach by the applicant to extend the road 3 meters and to offer 3 meters of public road frontage may be a convenient and viable option, as there could technically be access to the property from the 3 meters of frontage. However, but the proposed access agreement negates the need to accommodate an access from the frontage, and we would be in a situation where the only access to the public road is currently through another property. The staff recommendation is for recommending approval of the consent subject to the noted conditions. But North Perth Council does have the ability to address this in the interest of what they feel is necessary and convenient for the applicant, and can recommend a revision to the conditions if it is felt appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yilmaz. I want to pick up, if I might, with the first question here. It was plain from the presentation by Mr. Patterson that there were some late changes to the staff thinking and recommendations here. Can you explain how it is that these sort of emerged so late in the game, and why parties who've made this application are expressing frustration and citing other precedent at this point?
Sure, absolutely. It is absolutely a fair question, and I do understand the frustration. But basically, the application had come in without proposing a lot without any public road frontage or access, and so trying to bring an application that could have staff support. I've wanted to work with the applicant to come up with something. And so that was our first kind of suggestion. And it was really, my intent was to have the access come from the 3 meters, but the applicant was adamant to have the access agreement through the existing access. So that's where we kind of left it off as it went through circulation. And then during the final review of the report that we kind of share internally, it was questioned if the access easement does provide that direct access as per the official plan policy. And maybe we needed to look at that a little bit more. So that's kind of how that came about. I did try to contact the applicant at the earliest possible moment through a phone call. And then I did send a subsequent email. It was just unfortunate timing, and I would aim not to have that happen, because I would prefer to have that discussed if we could.
Okay, so we, if I understand things correctly, let me just clarify. We sit here tonight with sort of an uncertain approach, because the applicant is pretty adamant that they can achieve their outcomes with a 3 meter frontage, if it's approvable, and staff is recommending that that's not the best approach. Is the 3 meter approach approvable? Like, is it something that is, not atypical, that it could be a solution to this?
Yeah, so that's another good question. In thinking about it a little bit deeper, the goal is to achieve that frontage requirement so that there is that access. So there is to avoid having access have to cross over another property. However, adding that 3 meters as the public road frontage, in all essence, could provide an access to the site. Whether they want to use another one to get to the other part of the property is really something that could be outside of the realm of how it could be addressed. I think the cleanest way would be to have it front onto the public road, but I mean, the proposed 3 meter solution, in my opinion, still meets, could still meet the intent of the official plan.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Clerk Bearfield, who do we have with questions? Councillor Barnes?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Kasenberg. Good evening, Sean. A question. Did anyone consider, it would appear to me that I believe what we're shown on the map is about 0.77 acres that the severance is going to be from the other lands. Did anyone consider that maybe you sever that whole lot and that lot owner grants an easement for the other lands? Do you understand what I am suggesting here?
Thank you for the question, and I think I do. I think this was a proposal really from the applicant, and they had come forward with it this way. I can't say that we did consider other alternative approaches to the severance, but really we were working with what the application had come forward.
Okay, so, but I understand that, like what I have suggested, like it's going to be probably 1.2 acres or whatever severance, which is still tolerable in the North Perth world, at least. Unfortunately, it still means that the owners of the agricultural property would have to have an agreement with whoever owns the house, some sort of easement. Do you understand what I'm saying? In order to have road access. And I'm not sure that the laws are such that they can landlock a piece of property either. So I'm not saying that's a solution, but what I'm suggesting is the planner, Mr. Patterson, has suggested that we've done the alternative before in the Listwell ward, and I'm trying to understand why this is any different, because the applicants are waiting on, change in boundary lines, all of that. And we all know that can take some time for the settlement areas, for the Perth County official plan. This land may not be developed in the next 5 years. It may not be developed, period. So it doesn't make sense to require them to spend a great deal of money on a driveway if it is simply to that one house. So I understand what Mr. Patterson is saying on behalf of the applicants. I'm just trying to grapple with it all. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, essentially that easement area is 20 meters wide, and that is essentially the road necessary for, or the width necessary for a public road. The idea of not having the severed lands encroach into that is to essentially preserve that potential road access in the future. And that's even my understanding from the applicant's perspective. That's why their proposal for their lot area didn't encroach that 20-meter area. And I think it's important from a planning perspective to consider if these lands get transferred to somebody else in the future. And I know that the intent is not for that to happen, and they have shown that dedication to do things in the future, and so we do note that. In terms of an added cost, I mean, it is something that does sound a little bit expensive to complete this endeavor. In reality, we want to work with the applicant, and that was the number one goal from the beginning, to get something that could be approved from councils.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rothwell, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor Todd, and thank you, Sean, for the two reports. Just by way of background, I was certainly involved back on the item which was talked about as being a precedent in the list award off of Alder Street by Planner Patterson. And just by way of background is that the preferred approach on that lot was that we have a plan of subdivision created for all of those lots back there. In the end, North Perth Council and then the county's land division committee agreed with North Perth Council to create individual lots with easements along to create the access for all those other parcels. The only issue that we're dealing with in this application is the creation of one lot only, and then the balance of the parcel would be basically on hold until such time as the county official plan moves forward and to incorporate all, some or all of the retained lands. It should be noted that the critical issue is that the consent application is the driving factor here. And our decision on the consent, and well, I guess the Land Division Committee's decision on the consent will drive what happens with the zoning bylaw. In my view, even though the applicant wants us to make a decision on the zoning bylaws this evening, is that if we make a decision on the zoning bylaw, which is not in compliance with what the provisions that the Land Division Committee ends up approving on the consent, they'll have to start over again on the zoning bylaw, because once the public meeting is held, and if we do give 3 readings to the bylaw, we cannot go back. We'll have to start again. So I would suggest that it's prudent to defer the zoning bylaw and get our decision on the consent forward. And my recommendation is on the consent is that I think it's unfortunate that the matter only came to light last Thursday, as I understand, in terms of the revised conditions. I'm not confident that staff have given us the rationale for the whole of the road allowance to be at the full expense of the applicant to create this one lot. I don't believe that that's appropriate. I would hope that we have an alternative, and it sounds through Planner Yilmaz, we do have one in terms of the 3 meters. So I would be in favor of that if the applicant is, and then we can deal with the zoning bylaw at a later time. Thank you.
Thanks. Any feedback, Mr. Yilmaz?
Not particularly at this point.
So, Council, I have before me the resolution that would act to make a recommendation to Land Division, to County of Perth Land Division Committee. This is the first order of business on this matter. And at this point in time, it includes clauses 7 and 8, which apparently transfer to the owners a responsibility to satisfy the municipality regarding the construction of an extension of Woodview Drive. And you've heard from the discussions we've had so far tonight that the proposition is that there's a difference between what the parties who've made the application have suggested, which is a 3 meter, what's the term I'm looking for? Easement, thank you. And a 20 meter extension of Woodview Drive to cover off road purposes in that area, road purposes which may lead may contribute to future development, but those things are not what we're contemplating at this time. So I guess my question to council is, what are your wishes with regards to items 7 and 8 in the recommendations to land division, which really do sort of push the notion of the possibility of a 20-meter extension and the parties absorbing the costs of the paving of that for a road. What does council say? I've heard Councillor Rothwell say that he believes that perhaps 7 and 8 are too onerous and might be removed as conditions. I'm interested in hearing whether other councillors have a different position. Are there any who would like to argue for keeping 7 and 8 at this point? Are you seeing any indication of this? Okay, so 7 and 8. Councillor Barnes, please.
Okay, it's getting a little confusing, but I think you have to somewhat keep a portion of 7 because it's not dealt with anywhere. That one little strip of piece of property isn't dealt with anywhere. So I think you have to keep 7. I don't believe you have to keep 8, but 7, I believe, needs to be somewhat amended. Just check, let me check my notes here for a minute. Yeah, I think it's 7 needs to be revised, and right now 8 needs to be removed. So I'm just wondering, because in 7 it says, like, we still need to make sure that there is, that we deal with that piece of property because it's not staying with the other piece of property, or is it?
Yes, great questions, and thank you for that, Councillor Barnes. Mr. Yilmaz, I think Councillor Barnes has a really valid point with regards to 7. 7 sets the constraints around creating that frontage that I think you've talked about, whether it's 20 meters or 3 is not necessarily material. There's a need to create that frontage, right? And it looks to me like 7 is the means by which that can be done. To Councillor Barron's question, do we need to modify 7 in a particular way if we were opting for the 3-meter package?
Yeah, so that is a great comment and question. Basically, if the recommendation is to go with a different approach, the conditions need to be revised to reflect that approach. That would include that the conveyance of land, whether it be 3 meters, is made to the municipality, but also we'd want to capture that an easement is registered over that the existing driveway to complete the severance as we move forward.
Okay, I have to admit that to this mind at this moment, I'm not prepared to figure that out. It sounds like something that a planner and perhaps a lawyer need to be involved in. So I'm struggling a little bit about how to proceed with regards to this motion short of deferring it. Let me just turn to the clerk for a moment, just to ask her advice on procedure. Please hold on. All right, so the clerk has suggested that I ask Mr. Yilmaz, would you be prepared to revise item 7 in the conditions tonight in this meeting so that we could deal with it over the course of this meeting? Or does this require a deferral of some sort so that staff has time to respond appropriately?
Well, to be honest with you, I think it would require some thought rather than on the spot to ensure that the wording of the conditions are correct. There could be a recommendation that doesn't necessarily word the conditions at this point, but speaks to revising the conditions in the effect that would permit the severance based on the 3 meters, and then we could potentially draft something to that effect. But again, it's having something prepared right now could be a bit of a challenge, although maybe not impossible. I believe I do have something already drafted, but I don't have it accessible at the moment. So I would have to go look and see.
Okay, so I think what we need to do is get clarity about this then. Council, it would appear that there is a need for at least one deletion of a condition, certainly a revision of a condition, and perhaps additional language in other places, which could include additional conditions for all I know, to support a 3-meter frontage easement approach. And at this time, it seems like we don't have the text and tools in front of us at this moment in time. Okay, so before I make a suggestion, then let me hear from Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd. I understand time's of the essence on these things, but we haven't heard from Sean. When does the Land Division Committee, because this would be a contested application or consent at the moment, when are they scheduled to deal with this application? And that might help us determine as to whether or not we could defer this matter to have Sean and Scott perhaps work together on something and report back to us in an hour or so. Because it looks, well, I'm just estimating time for the rest of the meeting. And if not, then we defer to our next council meeting for both the zoning and the consent to give a recommendation. That's my suggestion.
Thank you. I was pondering the possibilities there. Mr. Yilmaz, do you feel you're in a position to collaborate with this evening in the next hour or so on this, or are we looking at deferring to the next meeting?
The next
Judgment.
Sorry, yeah. So the next land division meeting that this would potentially go on would be at the end of August. Because it won't make the July meeting at this point. But we would want to have our report done and ready a couple of weeks before that date. I mean, if Scott's available, I mean, I could go pull out my previous reports and recommendations that I've drafted, and because I have looked at it from this angle before, and we could probably come up with something this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Yilmaz. What I'm seeing from some notes from councillors in the WebEx chat function is that they think that deferral might be an appropriate option at this time, given that we're not going to hit a land division committee till the end of August. So that does give us time for this council to receive an improved report at its next meeting. August the 9th would be the next meeting of this council when this matter would be considered. I believe that probably still affords enough time to hit the Land Division Committee meeting at the end of August. Mr. Yilmaz, any confirmation of that one way or the other?
That should give us enough time. It's squeezing it in, but we could do it and have something.
Okay, that's good. So I'm seeing a few voices saying let's defer this until we receive the appropriate information back. So why don't we have a resolution to that effect, that think of what we're saying here. We are going to move to defer. So Pat, is it just as simple as recognizing that we've received the report, which is the first paragraph of the current resolution, and then the council recommends or the council defers its recommendation or decision until the meeting of August 9th. Okay, everyone understand what we're doing? We're using the first paragraph of the current resolution, and the second one says, and the council defers its decision on a recommendation to the Land Division Committee until its meeting and further reporting of August 9th. Everyone okay with that? Anyone see anything headachy with that? Pat, do you see any problem there? Okay. Okay. Okay, so I think that's where we're going to go then. Let's get a mover and a seconder here. Councillor Andreessen, will you serve as our mover for that resolution?
Yes, I'll make that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Anstett, will you serve as our seconder?
Yes, I would second that. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. I just want to be clear as we move into this that our intention is to give the planner our sense that a 3-meter solution is acceptable to this council. Is there anyone who does not understand this resolution that way? Our purpose in deferring is to ask for a revision that relates to the 3 meters. Anyone opposing that? Okay, so now we need to have a vote on this resolution, but I'd entertain any further comments if there are any at this point. We're not seeing any, so let's have that vote. I'm noting that Councillor Seiler is with me in the chamber right now. And eScribe has crashed on me again.
I'm in favor. My eScribe's down again, Mayor Kaysenberg.
My goodness, we're having a hard time with this tonight, aren't we?
I'm in favor as well.
Okay. Okay, I'm in favor. Councillor Seiler has said he's in favor verbally in the chamber.
Me too.
Councillor Richardson.
Councillor Johnston as well.
Councillor Johnston, thank you. Anyone we're missing at this point? There's someone. We need one more vote. Who are we missing? Can you see that?
It's Councillor Rothwell.
Councillor Rothwell, what say you?
Yes, I mentioned I am in favor.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, that's carried. We have deferred this matter to August 9th with an understanding of our intentions here. Clerk Barfels. So same resolution for the zoning bylaw. We still have to deal with the fact that the zoning bylaw was put before us this business tonight, Council. The clerk is advising me that we do need to address this. So what we need to do here, same resolution, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth defer a decision on the application for a zoning bylaw amendment affecting property described as park lots 16 and 17, concession 8, Elma Ward 302 Woodview Drive, Atwood, in the municipality of North Perth. So I need to find a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Behrens, will you serve as our mover for that one?
Yes, I will move that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Duncan, will you serve as our seconder for that one?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay. So any discussion or debate on that one? Seeing none, let's have that vote. We're praying for pop-ups at this point. Okay, so okay.
I'm in favor. I'm not able to vote. It's Councillor Andreessen.
Thank you, Councillor Andreessen. Who else do we have? I'm in favor. And
I'm in favor.
Seiler. So Councillor Seiler's in favor with that. It's carried. Thank you. My word, we're having challenges tonight with the tech. Make sure how we do it. All right. Next up then is item 5.2.2. In this matter, the clerk is bringing forward amendments to the so-called North Perth Council procedural bylaw and to the North Perth Boards and Committees procedural bylaw to further work begun at the last council meeting with the adoption of a resolution calling for the reading of a land acknowledgement statement at all formal meetings of council, boards and committees and staff meetings. I think, do we have anything to say? No, these are sort of housekeeping routines. Council, if there are questions you have, certainly you're welcome to ask them, but this is just sort of the mop-up that comes from the change we made last week. So why don't I introduce the first motion, and then if there's questions, we'll open up to the clerk. So this reads that bylaw number 82-2021, being a bylaw to amend the North Perth Council procedural bylaw 40-2015, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call on Councillor Johnston to be our mover for this one?
Yes, I would so move.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson, will you serve as seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate or questions in this case? We're not seeing any. Maybe should we just have that vote and see what comes up? Nothing. In my case, nothing.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Seiler records in favor. Oh, no, it's just popped up. How about that? So we're missing one. And that one is Councillor Rothwell. Councillor Rothwell, what say you?
Yes, I'm in favor of had to restart again.
Thank you. Thank you. So with that, that's carried. The companion, it relates to boards and committees. Here's how it reads: that bylaw number 83-2021, being a bylaw to amend the Perth Boards and Committees Procedural Bylaw 150-2018, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Councillor Rothwell, will you serve as mover?
Yes.
And Councillor Seiler, will you be our seconder?
I will. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate on that one? Seeing none, let's have that vote. Fingers crossed. It came up for me.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Seiler, thank you. And Councillor Duncan this time. What say you? Oh, we're having a little internet problems there. Try again, if you would, Matt. In favor? Okay, I heard in favor. That's carried. So a little bit of intermittency there, Councillor Duncan, just so that you know. All right, let's move on to what do we have next here? Sorry, we're moving on to, okay, we're moving through a few items. 5.3, we don't have a report from the manager of programs tonight. 5.4, we don't have a report from facilities tonight. We know they're working hard. It's the summertime. This is when they're pressed for some of their busiest actions. So thank you to you and your staffs, Ms. Gangle, Mr. Newell. We appreciate your service. That brings us to item 5.5, reports from Treasury. We have as item 5.5.1, finance staff has brought forward for council review the accounts as of this date, July 5th. Not July 5th, today is July 19th. My notes are bad. I'll note that some councillors have declared a potential pecuniary interest in this item and will absent themselves from consideration and voting. Are there any questions about this report for our staff? This is a big number tonight. Are we seeing anything, Clerk Bearfields? Okay, so I have a resolution that reads as follows. The following summary of accounts be received by council for information. The total is $3,552,784.66. No dyslexia included tonight. And let's see who we're calling on for this one. Councillor Seiler, will you be our mover for this one?
I will move that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Andreessen, will you serve as our secretary?
Yes, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate? Let's have that vote. And I think
I'm in favor.
Councillor Seiler's in favor. Are we missing Councillor Duncan? What say you? No, she can't vote. Councillor Duncan, are you with us still? Clerk, can you check to see if Councillor Duncan is signed in to WebEx at this point? Just in case. Okay, so it appears we've lost Councillor Duncan, so we'll ask that the notes record that Councillor Duncan was absent for this vote, and with that, it's carried. All right, thank you. We have one report from Environmental Services as item 5.6 tonight. Item 5.6.1 invites council to award the tender consulting services related to the AMI water meter replacement program subsequent to a public RFP and selection process. To ask Mr. Hackett, our manager of environmental services, to address this report. Welcome, Mark. I think welcome, Mark. Mark, are you with us? Did we lose Mr. Hackett at an inopportune moment? Mr. Hackett, the floor is yours. Can't hear you at this point. Whether you had microphone or muted.
Hello.
Hey, there we are.
Okay. Sorry, trouble with my.
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. So over the past few months, we've been looking at a couple different options for moving forward with the water meter replacement program. One of the options would be to use the current system, which is an automated meter reading system. It's known as AMR, and it's a drive-by radio system where there's a unit in a vehicle that gets driven around whenever we do reads on a monthly basis, and then the data is brought back and downloaded, and then that's where the billing comes from. The other option is to look at something that's more advanced, and it's actually called Advanced Metering Infrastructure, or AMI, and it's real-time meter reading system that has a network of water meter reading technology. And we prefer this route for a number of reasons, and I'll go through those. The real-time usage information would be provided to the municipality and to each of the customers and the public so that they can view their current status of how much water they're using via a dashboard. It'd be similar to other utilities like Hydro One, where you have a dashboard that you can go on and see how much hydro you're using. This one, you'd be able to see how much water you're using. It would also help us deal with incidents such as excessive water usage, where there's been a problem. Right now, the only way we would really find that out where it's red flagged for us is when the next meter read is completed on a monthly basis. So you could have an entire month where you have water leakage, and that can often turn out to be hundreds of dollars for a customer who's not aware that they're having an issue. Under the AMI system, you'd be able to pinpoint that, and you would get a red flag noting that you have a high water usage, and the municipality would also get that notification, and you could look into solving those problems right away and eliminate those really large bills for the customers. It would allow us to implement a system that is capable of being compatible with a number of different water meters. Right now, we're kind of tied to one system, one water meter type or brand. It would allow us to operate using multiple types of meters, and that would allow us to be competitive through a process of tendering in the future as well for when we buy replacement water meters. I think the big one is in the administrative and staffing efficiencies that we'll recognize from this. Like I said, right now we have a staff member goes out for the day, drives around, and collects all the data on a monthly basis. They also have to go out if there's missed reads, which happens, and they also, whenever there's a real estate closure or a house closing, they have got to get meter reads at that time. This AMI system would allow an instantaneous from your computer desk that would be able to get water meter reads. It would save a lot of time and energy and be very efficient for us. And it's also sort of future proofing as it appears that AMI seems to be the way that most municipalities are moving forward in the future. AMR is definitely an older technology, still works, but we prefer the AMI. So what we've done then was put together a request for a proposal, mainly because we wanted to have some help in in how to deal with this. It's not something, the AMI is not a system that we're familiar with. It's very technical in nature. And then also the other reason was that it is a sizable budget for this project moving forward in 2022. And we wanted to make sure we got it right. And so we put out a request for proposal on May 10th. We had two main components. That was confirmation of the initiative, which would ensure that we're moving in the correct direction by choosing AMI technology and that system, that it would work. As I mentioned, it's very technical. There's propagation studies that need to be completed. It would provide a plan as how to move forward with infrastructure, and also provide an estimated budget and timeline for the project. The second portion of the RFP was the bid and contract support. It's a very detailed process of what would be included in the bid. So they would help develop the bid requirements and specifications, and they would also assist the municipality in evaluating the responses, and then also help to negotiate and complete signature-ready contracts. There was a third portion that was optional. It was about project management, but we found through talking to a number of the different suppliers of AMI technology that would most likely be part of the actual RFP, or the request for tender when we move forward in the future. It would be part of the program then, that we wouldn't necessarily need that. So the RFP closed on June 18th, and we had just two proposals were received. One was from a company named Green Pie. They didn't really have any experience in the water meter market, and there was another company called eSource. They're out of the States. We did an evaluation with them because they have a lot of experience in this. They have helped municipalities and communities across North America. And they have some recent experience in Halton region, Peel, and also in Halifax. So we contacted them, and they gave us a presentation. And from that presentation, we felt that there was a really high value to what they were offering. We have completed the initial reference checks, and we've had a very good positive feedback about them. We have not completed that process. Simply because of some scheduling difficulties, because of holidays and things like that, that we weren't able to finalize that, and that's hopefully being completed this week. One of the reasons we wanted to bring it forward to this council meeting, because it would be, the next council meeting is 3 weeks away. We really didn't want to hold it up any longer. We wanted to be able to get going on it, because it does seem to be a very tight timeline to be able to complete everything that we wanted to do. So the timeline, speaking of that, once this would be awarded, we would then develop the tender that would go out for the AMI, the water meters, and the water meter installation. And we'd have that, hopefully have that awarded by the end of this year. And that would leave us the following year, 2022, to complete the installation of all the new water meters throughout the system. Looking at the pricing from eSource, for the two components, came to a total of $141,000 and $447. I'll note that at the time, Josh was able to negotiate that down by almost $30,000, so that was a good thing. And then if we were to feel the need that we wanted some project management aspects of it, we would then bring that back to council if we felt that. But right now, I don't think that would be something that we would need to do. I could take any questions. I do know that Josh is also available. He's sitting in on this meeting tonight, and could answer questions as well if that was necessary.
Council, any questions or first comments on this matter? Clerk Berkowitz, are we seeing anything? We're not seeing anything. So I have a resolution there for our consideration. The Municipality of North Perth award the consulting for AMI water meter replacement program request for proposal number NP-002-21P to eSource Companies LLC for a total cost of $141,447, excluding HST, contingent on the final reference checks being deemed satisfactory. And I call on Councillor Anstett to be our mover.
Yes, I would move that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barons, will you serve as seconder?
Yes, I will second that motion. Thank you.
Thanks. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote.
I'm in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Seiler. And there's one more.
I'm in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. With that, that's carried.
Thank you.
Let's then turn, thanks, Mark. Let's turn to item 5.7. We're on to reports from manager of operations, and we have a whole bunch of things here tonight. Item 5.7.1 invites council to award the tender for the improvement of the Holman Municipal Drain to Robinson Farm Drainage. Mr. Couch, any quick comments on this one?
Good evening, thank you. I'm just looking at the agenda here for, yes, okay, it's the award of the Burnett Municipal Drainage in front of council. Tenders were opened on July 8th. The budget from the engineer is listed there at 115,000, with the low bid coming in from at 108,000. Thank you. And the recommendation is in front of you, simply to award to I'm sorry, I'm having connection problems and can't see my screen. I believe it was Robinson Farm Drainage. And you can read that motion and bring it to council. Thank you.
Can I just clarify with the clerk, the resolution says Holman here, and it says Holman and eScribe, but Mr. Couch said Burnett. Which one is it? Okay. Mr. Couch, which drain are we talking about? Is it Holman or Burnett?
You know, I would defer to the drainage superintendent. He's on the line here right now as well. And I know he worked on this with procurement. Scott Richardson.
Thank you, Scott. Welcome to our meeting. Are we talking about the Holman or the Burnett drain here? Scott, we can't hear you. Scott, are you with us? Wow, we're losing connections all over the place here. Yeah, I'm not sure how to proceed.
Hi there, it's Josh here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Josh.
I am pretty sure Holman went the previous council meeting. This is Burnett.
Okay, so this is Burnett. Okay, so the resolution that I have in front of me is not quite right. Good to know. Thank you, Josh, for clarifying that for us. All right, so let's turn our attention back to this. Then we have a resolution.
Mr. Mayor, sorry,
Yes.
it's Councillor Johnston here. I need to declare a conflict on this.
Certainly.
As I'm a landowner on that Burnett Municipal Drain.
Noted. Thank you, Councillor Johnston. Okay, so council, I have a resolution. That the Council of the Municipality of North Perth award the tender for the Burnett Municipal Drain improvement as per the recommendation from Dietrich Engineering Limited to Robinson Farm Drainage in the amount of $108,886 HST excluded. Councillor Duncan, can I call on you to be our mover for this one?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you. And Councillor Richardson, will you serve as our seconder?
I will second that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any discussion or debate now that we got it clear? Burnett. Discussion or debate? Let's have that vote. Okay.
I'm in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Seiler. And I think that's the entire crew, noting Councillor Johnston's abstention. Also, then let's move on to 5.7.2. We have here for this one, council is invited to consider the abandonment of a portion of the 17th concession drain at the request of a landowner. I'll invite Mr. Richardson. I think you're with us. Did you want to offer a few comments on this one?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Oh, way to go. Oh, that's good. Good to see everybody tonight. Yeah, the last engineer's report on this one was done in 1953, and it has a bylaw that's 358. The drain serves lots 12 to 14. concession 16 and lots 12 to 14, concession 17. The drain consists of an open and a closed portion. The request to abandon the portion on this drain runs through lot 14, concession 17, north of line 57. I reviewed it myself and determined there was only one landowner affected, and the proposal would be to abandon 1,200 meters of the drain, 500 being tile and 700 of it being open ditch. The municipality would have no further obligation with regards to future maintenance for this drain, and that would be all for that.
Thanks, Mr. Richardson. Questions or first comments from council? Councillor Rothwell, do you have a question on this one?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Todd. I'm not sure why my question wasn't asked before. It was actually on the previous report. Can staff make sure that the report is corrected with the names, because it is a municipal drain? I think it's important that the name is on the municipal drains. So there is no confusion. So it should be the Burnett.
Yeah, the clerk is confirming that they will pour over all the documentation and so forth and bring it to conformity with the Burnett drain. Thanks, Councillor Rothwell.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't think we have any questions or comments on this 17th concession drain abandonment. So let me read the resolution that I have. The Council of the Municipality of North Perth, in accordance with Section 84 of the Drainage Act, consider the abandonment of this portion of the 17th concession drain at the request of Ed Tolinar, owner of Tall Acres. Let's see here. Councillor Johnston, would you serve as the mover for this one?
Yes, I'd be glad to move that.
Thank you. Councillor Rothwell, will you be the seconder?
Yes, I will.
The boys from Britain together there. All right. Any discussion or debate on that one? Okay, let's have that vote.
I'm in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Seiler. Are we missing someone else? And that's carried. We've got everyone. Thank you. Next up then is item 5.73. Council is invited to proceed with the request for improvement of the Logan Maitland drain. Mr. Richardson, I note you're here. Do you want to say a few words on this one?
Yeah, this one's pretty straightforward. Again, it's from the Tolner family, or Ed Tolner. This is basically just going to be a ditch relocation. It's at parts lot 18 and 19, concession 18, and they just wanted to do a relocation for more efficient farm practices with the bigger equipment that's out there nowadays. This is the way some of the landowners are wanting to go, and that's it for that one.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or first comments from council on this one? I have a resolution for our consideration that reads as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth, in accordance with Section 78 of the Drainage Act, proceed with the request for improvement of the Logan Maitland Municipal Drain. And I call on Councillor Seiler to be our mover for that one.
I will move that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Andreessen, will you serve as our seconder?
Yes, I'll second that motion.
Thank you very much. Any discussion or debate? Let's have that vote.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Seiler. And with that, it's carried. Thank you. That allows us to move down to 5.7.4. This one, council is invited to proceed with the request for improvement of the Reed Municipal Drain. Mr. Richardson, comments?
One more here. Yeah, the purpose for this is for council to consider the 78. Drain serves part lots 37 to 40, concessions 4 and 5. The drain was constructed in 1982 under a report prepared by K. Smart and Associates and was adopted under bylaw 19-1982. The current state of the drain, it is in satisfactory condition. I was out there with the landowners. The problem in this case is a capacity issue. It is incredibly undersized by today's standards. The drain consists of 12-inch, 16-inch, and 21-inch pipes. There's also a branch A that's about 100 meters in length, and it's a 12-inch. The existing drain will convey only about a half-inch of water in 24 hours. So the scope of this project would be to twin the existing one because it is in fairly good shape, and get the system up to an 1.5 inch drain coefficient, which is an 1.5 inches of water it would convey in 24-hour period. And we'll add some catch basins where they're required. The county road is the only one that is affected on this. The North Perth won't have any road involvement with this. So that's all with that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. I'm starting to think you're the busiest man in town based on tonight's reports. Okay, any questions or first comments for this matter? All right, I have a resolution for our consideration that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth, in accordance with Section 78 of the Drainage Act, proceed with the request for the improvement of the Reed Municipal Drain. And let's see here, Councillor Anstett, will you serve as our mover for this one?
Yes, I would move that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan, will you serve as the seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate? Okay, we're not seeing any, so let's have that vote. And my vote didn't come up this time.
I'm in favor.
I'm in favor as well. Wow. We need one more.
Favorites, Councillor Rothwell.
Councillor Rothwell, with your vote, that makes it carried. Thank you very much. And Council, bear with me. I need to bring eScribe back up one more time. Okay, let's see whether that gets us there. All right, let's move on to item 5.7.5. This one invites council to authorize additional roadworks not earlier identified that prepares through pulverization line 88 in the vicinity of Wallaceville for a repaving effort that is anticipated in 2022. This will leave the affected road portion in gravel state through the winter months of 2021 and early 2022 until that repaving project is completed. Mr. Couch, did you want to offer some comments on this one?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Kasenberg. We did this last year on line 89 where pulverization happened, but also as part of that, there was a widening of the road base, as well as we were able to contour the ditching, etc. We can do all that work this year in conjunction with other work we're doing on line 89, but we don't have the resources or time really to meet the paving schedule or the cost of paving this year. So by doing this, we're prepared for next year's program. The road settles over the winter, and we can verify that it's in perfect condition really for paving and regrade at that point. So although it's not a large ticket item, it's about $75,000 worth of materials, maybe $10,000 or $15,000 worth of time and other materials for the shoulders, etc. But it's more to inform that will be left in the state of gravel through the winter months, as we did last year. If there are questions that council receives, they can explain that. But that leg would then be paved as part of the 2022 program. It allows us to get a jump start on that program next year.
Thank you, Mr. Couch. Questions or first comments from council? Clerk Bearfelds? Councilor Andreessen?
Hi, thank you through you, Mayor Kasenberg. Thank you, Mr. Couch. You're doing a great job with this report, and I know that those in Wallaceville will appreciate this work. The question I have is, will there be some kind of communication to those residents so that they understand kind of what the process will be, so that they don't think we're reverting back to gravel road? Sometimes that happens with residents. Thank you.
Mr. Couch?
What we could do is we can certainly update our website information on the capital program that explains what we're doing on the line, maybe put a little star around the fact that this is new and that this will be the state it's left in. I do correspond with the residents. There's a few residents there, and we can make a point actually as we're talking about, actually we're looking at installing signs and speed limit signs there right now. So we'll be in correspondence with them. We could at least let the people of Wallaceville know as we talk with them, and then any other ratepayers that call in obviously get the information straight off from staff as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Seiler is next.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. Yeah, it's just Linden driveways there. There's a couple of driveways there. Will you be talking to some of the landowners to see what the widening of some of the driveways? I know there's one there we pick up there in Wallaceville there that could maybe use a little bit of widening. Will they have an opportunity to be able to do that at the same time?
We've just done several rural blocks, and what we do is we do expand the lift of asphalt. You can see across the widenings of the driveways. So there's a flare that defines a driveway, and it allows for a transition zone. We do that at all driveways. We talk to every resident ahead of time as we run the paving operation through there. So there is that extension on the side of the asphalt that leads into driveways like that. In terms of the actual widening of the driveway for the landowner, if they're interested in doing that, that would be works that they would be able to conduct in the driveway as it approaches our road, and we can expand that asphalt approach accordingly as we have those discussions with them. It's worked very well, and you'll see that on 158 as well as 89 and every driveway, which is field driveways as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments at this point, Clerk? So I have a resolution for our consideration on this one, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receive the information and support staff regarding the pulverization of line 88 from Road 152 to Road 146 be pulverized and prepared for 2022 paving. Resolution reads a little strange there. I'm not too sure about that. Councillor Behrens, will you serve as our mover for that one?
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Thanks. And Councillor Johnston, will you be our seconder?
Yes, I would second that.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate? Let's have that vote.
I'm in favor.
Thanks, Councillor Seiler.
I'm in favor as well. My vote didn't pop up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Enstedt.
Councillor Rothwell, I'm in favor.
Councillor Rothwell, yeah.
Councillor
same here.
Behrens.
Oh,
Councillor Behrens.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Richardson, thank you. Wow.
Councillor Johnston is in favor.
Councillor Johnston, thank you.
Councillor Andreessen in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Andreessen. With that, it's carried. Wow, we're really deteriorating in terms of our technology in this meeting. All right, so that is carried, thanks. Item 5.7.6 invites council to receive information about pedestrian crosswalk actions that are proposed in Listowel and to approve projects to construct same in the current year and preferably close to the restart of the school year. Mr. Coach, you're up on this one too.
Thank you. This is really an update of an ongoing program for pedestrian crossovers and the receiving of two separate reports. The first being Wallace Avenue North at Inkerman Street. There's been a fair bit of discussion and a report that was received through Triton Engineering for all crosswalks. We knew that more study was needed through their original report a couple of years back at the intersection, and they've done that, and it was attached to the report. The general recommendations are to keep the pedestrian crossover there at the same location for several issues of safety and also layout and visibility and usage. This is a crosswalk that needs approval through the MTO. They approve the intersection drawings as well as they would need to see it in our bylaw. And the bylaw wording is attached, and so is the recommendation that would make that change to make it acceptable for the MTO. So I can respond to any questions about that after I just talk about the one on Wallace South, but that's really the crux of it. The existing PXO is in the best location. It's recommended, we had discussion about it going to the north side. It's recommended that it not do that. This is mainly because of the usage, which is on the south side of the intersection by a vast majority of the pedestrians. The consultant felt that they wouldn't cross the road to cross the road on Wallace. They wouldn't go to the north side. There's something called a pedestrian desire line. It means that most of the pedestrians are used to using the crosswalk as it sits today, and the vast majority do use the crosswalk and do not jaywalk across the street. It's used as a rationale to explain to the MTO that we have a pedestrian desire line, that it meets warrants and numbers of pedestrians, and that we would like to keep it in the same location and probably will be more acceptable to them. As well, the consultant said it's a safer location in general. If we had it on the north side, traffic that's heading southbound towards it would have to stop far back from the intersection. And if you can imagine, you're southbound on Wallace Street North and you want to make a left to Shoppers Drug Mart, you'd be stopping several meters back from that intersection, and then you would have to approach it really from a distance where you wouldn't see the corner and the activities of pedestrians. So the setbacks are a problem. By putting it on the south side of the intersection, cars can see a lot more about the left-right turn that they'll be making off of Wallace. So that was a factor, and that's explained in the report as well. So a variety of reasons, but just to let you know, it's to be maintained at the south side. We can provide drawings, the bylaw information to the MTO, and then move forward, hopefully, with construction this fall. We'd love to have that in place by November 1st. I'll move on to Wallace South, and this is a process where pedestrian crossings were looked at on Crotts at that intersection of Wallace. That's been reviewed, and there is a recommendation for a lit signalized push button pedestrian crossover there as well. And that is the recommendation that Paradigm Traffic did as they looked at the entire corridor. There's going to be a center line put through the entire length of the roadway. We're also going to put edge lines on to define the lanes in a tighter fashion, so it looks more residential and hopefully calms traffic to some degree. But the pedestrian crossover is the big recommendation here. We've actually started the implementation of new corners. We are waiting through a period of hearing back from the public on this process still, but we needed to initiate construction and order components for a planned start in September for that crossing to be in place. So that's the second report and the second recommendation for a PXO there. Really beyond that, those are the two that are in front of you, and there is a recommendation to receive the reports as they are, and then to move forward with construction as listed.
Thank you, Mr. Couch. Clerk Bearfields, who do we have for questions or first comments? Councillor Rothwell first.
Thanks, Mayor Todd. Question I have, and thanks, Lyndon, for the report. The question I have is, I'm not sure if I missed something, but in the recommendation, you talk specifically about the neighborhood traffic study, Wallace Avenue South, Community of Listowel, Municipality of North Perth, by Paradigm Traffic and Solutions Limited. I don't recall receiving that report. It's not an attachment here. Clearly, you've got some comments from there, but we have not seen that report as council. Is that correct?
I'd have to defer to the clerk. They were to be attached. They certainly can be attached now and reviewed, but the general recommendations, as I said, are in that report. That report's actually published on the web as well and was part of a public meeting that happened a couple weeks back, but should have been in the package.
Okay, I guess the clerk is showing it to us on the screen at this point. It was not with council materials. Okay. Okay, so there were some security provisions put in place, Councillor Rothwell, I'm being advised, that caused some difficulty for us to release this properly, but I believe we've solved that problem. And it's in the e-scribe now, apparently. Okay, do we have Terry? I thought I saw, yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Seiler.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. Just a question, Lyndon, at the increment intersection. that no left turn sign, what are we gonna do with that? I've had a few people make comments that they're cutting across the parking lot there at Hollis Wealth, and some people are just turning anyhow. So I know when we put that in place at the time, it was only for a trial basis. So what is your recommendation, what we do with that no left turn coming into Inkerman, coming down west, going across to the east?
Mr. Couch?
Thank you, Councillor Seiler. I do comment on that in the report, as did Triton in their report. The no left turn with a pedestrian crossover in that area is considered a safety issue and is necessary, and it's recommended that it stays in the current status that it's in. No left turn from both sides of Inkerman. So I write that it be placed in that the signage be placed in a highly visible area. So I'm going to have to work with the OPP on that to make sure it's enforceable, but those were considered to be a good change at the intersection and will suit the new PXO well. So we'll move the location of the signs and we will continue to run that program as it sits today with the restriction 7 days a week during basically the daylight hours.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Anstead?
Thanks, Mayor Kasenberg, through you. Thanks, Lyndon, for the report. Just a quick clarity question for me. Just looking at page 3, you talked about the following steps. The second last one was the public consultation, which it says in brackets is ongoing till July 31st. And then it says a final report and recommendation. Is this the final report, or are we waiting for the public consultation to be finished? Thank you.
Just to talk about the public consultation, we've had 3 comments. They happened right away after the meeting, and they were really about non-related items, asking for additional stop signs down on Crotts. We had several positive comments at the meeting, including from the school and the transportation company and the residents that came forward as a delegation to council a year back. Also said this was a very positive step, and they're looking forward to it launching for the beginning of the school year. So there's a bit of a time-sensitive issue there. We're still waiting for comments. We're not getting any more now. We'll wait till the 31st. The final report is in front of you and would not change even with those comments, but I could, they'll be summarized actually on our website as people write them in, but we haven't received anything for a week and a half on that one. But that is the final report.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rothwell is next.
Thanks, Mayor Todd. Just in the report, Lyndon, you mentioned specifically about the process where we had the public meeting for the official plan amendments regarding the designation of Wallace Avenue South. That public meeting was held, and then we are expecting additional information to come back from staff on that. Does that process, it's connected to this pedestrian crossover, is it not? And because, I mean, you mentioned it in the report, but how important is it that the official plan amendment goes ahead before this pedestrian crossover happens? And any other traffic calming? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll have to confer with the planner on that in terms of the timing. We should have the redesignation of the road in place at the time we put the PXO in place, because traffic calming measures should be done on collector roads and not on arterials. So I'll have to check, and yes, definitely look at the timing of the road reclassification in terms of the installation of the PXO as well. We can certainly have it in place and ready to go if it's a matter of waiting for an amendment on the road, which I believe went through. I'm not sure if the planner is here with us right now, but I can bring that back for a subsequent council meeting just to update the timing on it.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions or comments at this point on this matter? A resolution then for our consideration that reads as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receive the reports titled Municipality of North Perth Pedestrian Crossing Treatment Options for the intersection of Wallace Avenue North and Inkerman Street, Listowel, dated April 27th, 2021 by Triton Engineering Services Limited, and Neighborhood Traffic Study Wallace Avenue South, Community of Listowel, Municipality of North Perth, dated June 29th, 2021 by Paradigm Traffic Solutions Limited. And further, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approve the construction of pedestrian crossovers as specified in the reports at the intersections of Wallace Avenue North and Inkerman Street and at Wallace Avenue South at Crutz Street. And further, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth amend bylaw number 78-2016, the traffic bylaw, Schedule H, to include Wallace Avenue South at Crotts Street North Side, Wallace Avenue North at Inkerman Street South Side. Can I call on Councillor Richardson to be our mover?
I will move that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Rothwell, will you serve as our seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate? We're not seeing any indication of same, so let's try to have that vote.
I'm in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Seiler.
Me too. I'm in favor.
Councillor Richardson.
I'm in favor. Rothwell.
Councillor Rothwell.
Andreessen in favor.
Councillor Andreessen, thank you. And that is carried. We have all the votes in for that one. Thank you. So now let's move to some verbal updates here. Item 5.7.7 provides council with a staff verbal update and opportunity for comment on our earlier mandates pertaining to establishing a pilot or experiment that would change one block of Wallace Avenue South from Main to Elma to a one-way street. Mr. Couch, you're up.
Thank you. Just to update, we've been monitoring traffic flows through COVID to ensure that we had high enough traffic flows to test a trial of the one-way block south of Wallace. And again, it's the functioning of the traffic signal by taking a cycle out of it, which is going to speed up that intersection significantly. We should see a benefit for that. There will be costs of this as well. Northbound traffic has to divert to different methods as they move through that section of town. So we want to monitor those. So I've been having the ongoing discussions with the consultants as to how we monitor when we launch the trial. And the trial was approved to move ahead, but we found a week ago last Friday in a traffic count that our numbers were actually at par with August 2018 numbers. So the volumes are absolutely back, and you can see the queuing of transports and vehicles actually in all directions around the intersection. So we're seeing that inefficiency again and those high volumes. So I wanted to advise council and just give some dates. There's an August 9th council meeting where changes to the bylaw to create the one-way street, changes to the signage at Elma and Wallace South, for example, could all go through and will as part of this. I met with staff today to look at layout issues, make sure we have enough signage and everything appropriately ready. And we would look at launching the week of the 16th to the 20th, which means a lot of night painting and sign installation to get ready for the next day. We'll have a fairly detailed educational and website-based information package going ahead on this project. But I wanted to have those dates in front of council, simply saying coming back to the August 9th meeting and then launching the one-way trial block south of Wallace and Main the week of the 16th to the 20th. So that's for the information of council at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Couch. I'd entertain a few questions if there are any from council at this point, recognizing that the hour is late and things are moving on here. Anyone have questions? We know there's some controversy, so we're going to certainly rely on a decent education platform, Mr. Couch. I'm sure that's very important in this case. Okay, next up then, again, Lyndon, you're on. Council with a staff verbal update and opportunity for comment on rural road center lanes. I'm all ears. Please.
Again, this is related to traffic counts. We're capable of counting traffic on our busiest rural roads in general. The requirements for painting a center line down a rural road relates to the high number of cars that can occur during the peak hour, whenever the peak hour is. So if you see 200 cars in both directions in a peak hour, it would justify on some of our rural roads that we paint center yellow lines on them through the MTO guidelines. So we're going to go through a process over the next couple months of counting several blocks and seeing what we get in our peak hours. And then I'll be coming back to council with recommendations related to that on center yellow lines. I'll also bring back information from other municipalities. Many do not put center lines on for various reasons, mainly because of farm implements being large enough that when they cross those lines, it's a chargeable offense. And that's something we'd have to look at. And I will bring all of that information back probably in September after we do the counts in the rural blocks. I just wanted to let council know it's going to be some time till I come forward with the report that I was asked to present.
Thank you for that update, Mr. Couch. I'd again entertain a question or two. Anyone have anything to ask about that matter? Okay, so report pending is what I got from that. Thank you very much. All right. We're going to move on then. Thank you, Mr. Couch, and your team for all their work. It's a busy season for you too. We know it very well. Let's move on to one report that we have tonight from the fire department in section 5.8. Item 5.8.1 provides council with a staff update and opportunity to comment on actions that would ultimately bring council and effect a new open air burn bylaw. I certainly can advise that I've received a number of complaints about what is a very dated bylaw. So I have been looking forward to hearing from Chief Smith and his team on this one. And Chief, why don't we turn the floor over to you to comment on your report and what you're bringing forward.
Thank you, Mayor Kaysenberg, members of the council. We have a draft open air burn bylaw. As the background of the old bylaw, it was put in place in September 17th of 2001. And as the mayor indicated, we've had numerous questions and complaints throughout the years. And it was determined that that bylaw should be reviewed and updated as we could. So the proposed changes to the open air bylaw bringing the bylaw up to date, better serving the needs of a growing municipality. The proposed updates include clear, defined requirements for both rural and urban open air burnings and reporting process for nuisance fires and updated appendices dictating recreational fire requirements, materials that can and cannot be burnt, and approved burning appliances. So as you went through the new draft, you can see that we have tried to cover all our areas because we're a diversified municipality. So we're trying to deal with the issues of having fires within the rural areas, fires within residential areas, the urban areas, dealing with fire bans, permissions and penalties, and the contravention. What we also did was indicated how to report an illegal and nuisance fire, and the requirements that if you wish to report an illegal or nuisance fire. The big issues that we ran into also was that we had a lot of people complaining to us, giving us information in regards to reports or that there was issues in areas, but did not want to leave us their names, contact numbers, or anything else. And if it should happen that it had to go to court, we would be not in a very good position not having that information. As you can see in the appendices, that we really tried to indicate what was given and what is not permitted. And it was done nicely in colors. So we're trying to make this as easy and as simple as possible for the members of the public to be able to read it, identify what they can do and what they cannot do. We also attached a copy of the old bylaw that you can see at the rear of bylaw number 117-PW-2001 so that you could see the difference of what we have done and tried to create compared to what we originally had. So I am open for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions or first comments on this? I do want to point out, I'll get there in a minute. I do want to point out that the resolution that we have here before us is not tonight to adopt this bylaw, but to consider its adoption, which I believe could open us to a variety of additional actions, potentially including a public information center. So there's a couple of things that could happen We could move directly, if we really wanted to adopt this bylaw. We could open up some consultation on your, say, North Perth, or a public information session, or a combination of those things. There's a few actions, and so we've left this kind of open procedurally at this point. But let's take some questions and first comments, and then we'll go from there. Councillor Richardson is first. Thank you.
Thank you. Through your Mayor Kasenberg. Thanks, Ed, or Chief Smith, for the report. Very good. It's good to see that this bylaw has been finally updated. I've just got a couple of points that I'd like to bring to your attention. I do really like the visual references that you've given in there as to what is allowed. If I could refer everyone in the page package to page, if we go to the pictures first, as I'm scrolling right by it here. Just bear with me one moment, please. In the pictures, and I can't seem to find it right now, it is identifying that a garden hose needs to be hooked up to a pressurized water system, which makes 100% sense. However, if we go down to the middle of page 109 of the agenda package, it just says keep a garden hose available near the site while the fire is burning. I think that wording needs to be clarified a little bit to be pressurized to a water system, because we don't want anyone to challenge the bylaw itself because the wording is inaccurate. I prefer the picture wording in and itself. And also, for a quick council consideration, I did have a conversation with the chief today regarding the very next paragraph, where it says, see Appendix A, said barbecues for the purpose of cooking food shall be permitted, blah, blah, blah. No barbecues or open air burning of any kind shall be permitted on balconies of residential buildings. I'm just wondering if we happen to need a clarification of what warrants a residential building. Just thinking with the number of multi-unit dwellings that we currently have in town. In the municipality, that we want to make sure that we can differentiate between multi-level residential units and also residential units that just have like a side split, or just with a elevated patio, of which then being a single dwelling would be allowed to go on here. So I'm just wondering for clarification on that. Perhaps Chief Smith can provide something on that. It just sounds a little ambiguous. Whereas if we do have different descriptions ourselves for residential as compared to multi-residential, as compared to apartments and such, which have multi-elevation canopies or canopies and balconies over top of each other. And the only thing I wanted to draw attention to was section 5.0 on the bottom of page 110, and it's strictly grammatical, and that's nuisance, the word nuisance. That's all. Other than that, I think it's a very good report. Those are my only amendments that we happen to have on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Clerk Berfels, who's next? Sir Barnes is next.
Through you, thank you, Mayor Kasenberg. Chief Smith, I am, in reading the bylaw, it's excellent. I agree it needs to be updated. In the urban under 3.2, it says that number 8 says no burn barrels are permitted, but it doesn't really say in the rural areas that no burn barrels are permitted. Are burn barrels permitted in the rural areas?
That would be correct. As it's currently written right now, burn barrels are still permitted in the rural areas.
And do we have graphics for those as well? Were they attached?
There is no graphics attached for the burn barrels. We didn't put that in for the fact that we didn't want to indicate when we were doing the graphics that the members of the public in the residential areas could see a burn barrel and think they could still have one.
Okay, it's just confusing though when you reference it in the urban, but don't mention it, because the way I read it the first time round, I wasn't sure if I was allowed to have a burn barrel or not. So
we left it out of the rural areas, that burn barrels could still be used if they're there. We aren't promoting it. because we know what usually goes on in a burn barrel, but we did leave it that the rural area could still have a burn barrel.
Okay,
If you wish, we can change that. We can eliminate burn barrels in the rural areas also, if you do wish that.
Actually, no, I don't wish that, but all I'm saying is, because you know it's going to happen anyway, but all I'm saying is the way the bylaw is written, I
Yeah.
wouldn't know living in a rural area that I could have one. And I get your point on that. So
Yeah, okay,
I
that's fine.
understand. Thank
As far as Councillor Richardson, everything you brought forward, we will address that in the bylaw and try to come up with a little better definition for you for balconies.
Thank you.
Clerk Bergfeld, anyone further? Okay, so I have a few comments myself. I note that items you cannot burn, Appendix B, one hates to be too prescribed about this in ways that seem peculiar, but at the same time, I have heard certainly stories and complaints about asphalt shingles being burned, which seems like a really bad idea. So I don't know whether we need to think about construction materials of that nature as items you cannot burn. But I would say that it's worth at least a conversation because it has been alleged to have happened in North Perth. Also, I will point out, just generally speaking, I think this bylaw needs a good proofread. I found, Councillor Richardson pointed out a grammatical error. I found a number of them in here and a number of sort of type problems in terms of alignment. My internet connection dropped there. Here we are again. Appendix D warrants some careful editing. So I would certainly be in favor of a good proofread and evaluation of this. One more point that I want to make. Can you hear me?
Yep, I'm listening, Your Worship.
Okay, sorry, I'm seeing spinning. That makes me nervous. One more point that I want to make, and it's an interesting point. I'm not quite sure how we adjudicate this, Chief, but there are residents who have complained about the frequency of recreational fires in their neighbors' backyards. And complaints include that they are not getting fair enjoyment of their property because the neighbors have fires so frequently that they're constantly having to close their windows in the summer months because they can't stand the smoke. And I don't see that really dealt with here in any particular way. So I draw it to your attention that certainly there have been complaints to my attention that something needs to be considered at least. What right does a neighbor have if their neighbors are running fires 7 days a week and 12, 13 hours a day? I think we should consider at least that concern because it has been expressed. I can attest to that. And I believe you know that because you've had conversations with at least one party on this matter. So I think we might need to think a little bit about that scenario and whether there's anything that should be done short of telling neighbors to have arm wrestling matches in their driveways. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Chief Smith, if you have any comments.
Well, just that the biggest issue with that is also us trying to police knowing how many fires a person did have because it becomes a he said, she said in regards to some of it too, 3.2 also indicates that if there's any complaints from a neighbor that we will deal with that. So if a neighbor does give us complaints that there's a number of fires going on and they go through all the proper channels and the proper information, we will address that. The biggest issue that we run into most of the time is the fact that we get complaints, but nobody wants to give up any information in regards to what's taking place or who the person is doing the complaining and stuff. And as I tried to indicate before, our system works a little like the police services, that if we have to appear in court over it, we can't just sit in court and say, well, we had a phone call. We have to have all the proper documentation and information in place when we receive that information.
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you. I think, I mean, item 7 in 3.2 does indicate that neighbors have an approach. I think what we have to consider is how that gets adjudicated, right? Because right now, actually, that clause is pretty pretty strict. It says no burning is allowed if smoke conflicts with any neighbors. So that might be too aggressive. I don't know. I encourage you to think about that one a little bit further in your deliberations.
What we have done with that in that application, because that was also in the old bylaw, that if we were called to a burn by a neighbor and the proper processes had taken place, we would go, we would tell the person having the fire that you're having an issue with the neighbors because you're interfering with their normal day-to-day life because of smoke going in their windows. You need to take more courtesy. You need to extinguish that fire at this time and take the proper courtesy to try to have fires when you're not going to interfere with your neighbors.
Fair enough. Just as long as you feel that that wording doesn't compromise you one way or the other on that matter, I look forward to seeing that come forward. Do we have any other comments or questions at this point? Okay, Council. I mean, I can tell you what I'm thinking here, which is that you know, we've prepared this bylaw. Thank you very much. It's a dramatic update, and it, you know, our resolution says consider, but doesn't really spell out how we do that. So my personal suggestion is that we advise the public that we have received a draft of a new open air burn bylaw and that we intend to act on this and that we are seeking any citizen input before we do so. And that gives us also the opportunity to do that proofread that I've been asked before, and for a few of the questions that some of you have asked for further clarification on to be properly addressed. Comments? Clerk Barfels, do we have anyone looking to make a comment? Mr. Rothwell?
Thanks, Mayor Todd. Thanks, Chief Smith. I'm just wondering, Chief, if you could give a little bit of update, certainly on local media, and I believe on our social media sites, there was specific ads about the fire bylaw and so on. Did we get many comments or inquiries as a result of those efforts that we've done already? Thank you.
To my understanding, not, that we did not really receive any outstanding amount of requests or requests of information in regards to the bylaw, as it was the existing bylaw that was put before the public at that time. Due to the amount of complaints we'd had prior, you know, we were trying to do the best we could to educate the public that there is a bylaw there. But as far as a whole lot of questions to us, my understanding is there has not been a whole lot of other questions brought forward to us.
All right, so this was basically just a public education of our current bylaw.
Yeah, that's correct. It was a public education of the current bylaw that was done prior. I was not involved in that a whole lot. That was basically done through the CAO's office. We were not really involved in a lot of that. So they pushed it out to try to educate the public of the current bylaw.
Thank you, Chief.
Anyone else wanting to make comments? So what I'm going to suggest, Council, is that we bring this forward again at our next meeting with a revised and updated bylaw, perhaps, or feedback, Chief, if we're asking for things that that are already there that aren't that useful. And perhaps there is an opportunity for us to invite the community in a 2-week period to use Your Say North Perth to have comments on this bylaw as well. It seems like a reasonable approach that will bring us to our next meeting and lead to an opportunity for a refined bylaw that we can then consider more seriously at that point in time. Anyone feel very differently about how to proceed? We're not seeing anything on that one. So I think maybe the way we approach this is that the Council of Municipality of North Perth receives the report entitled whatever the report is for information, and that the council directs staff to begin a brief consultation. Let's keep it really brief, 10 days or something. A brief consultation through social media and Your Say North Perth, and that revisions and updates to the bylaw consider that input and the input from this council at this meeting for the purposes of bringing forward a revised, improved bylaw ready for our full consideration at the meeting of August 9th. Oh, poor Jeanette. Keep up with that. Clerk Fairfields, anything? Does that seem okay? All right, council, anyone have suggestions for improving that? Councilor Richardson, question?
Thank you. I sent the question wrongly. I'm just wondering, if we're having the fire department input on this, and I do appreciate everything that's been happening, do we really require to go back to the public for more consultation to get their opinion on it? If it's our burn bylaw, which has been recommended by our fire chief to say that this is what we're recommending as per complaints that we've received in the past, do we really need to go back to glean an awful lot of opinions when basically the fire department is saying this is what we need to put in place at this time? Just asking.
I tend to lean towards consultation. We have the tool, we have a little bit of time to act on this. And so the opportunity to let those who have been plaintiff about this subject, and certainly there are a few who've been plaintiff about issues around open air burning, who've made themselves known to me at least. I think it's the right thing to do is to let them have their say. That's a personal opinion. Happy for council to suggest another action.
Supplemental, I'm okay either way, but I just think that if our fire chief is coming forward with recommendations and also better opportunities for people reporting problem fires as per the bylaw, I sort of question the need for the public input, because then we can get so many different opinions in here that we'll still be beating this bylaw around to either be accommodating or whatever later in the fact. I understand the public input. That's always very important. I'm just understanding the need of this when it comes down to public safety, and especially upon the recommendation of the fire department. Thank you.
Okay, so are you suggesting a different strategy, Councillor Richardson? Just leave it with the fire department? Is that what I'm hearing?
Like I said, if we come back with an amendment, I'm not saying we have to update it significantly tonight. We can come back with a recommendation as per the fire chief that comes back with the edits that this has been forward. If it requires further editing by council approval at that time, that's great. But I would say that just to bring that forward and then do the public education and not the consultation, but the public education after the fact when the new bylaw has been put in place. My 2 cents.
Okay. Anyone else have a position where to stand on this resolution? How to compose it so that we put it on the floor? Maybe the right question is, maybe I'm wrong, Is anyone strongly opposed to putting this up on Your Say North Perth and saying, we're going to fire bylaw if you want to have a comment, make it?
Do you mind if I speak?
Go ahead, Chief Smith. Yeah.
The biggest issue you'll have is it is a law that you're trying to put into place. And it's like any other law that you try to put into place, there will be a lot of consultation into it. There will be people that'll wish that there is no burning period. There will be the people that want to have recreational fires. Unfortunately, because of COVID, I think we're seeing a lot more recreational fires. Under the Fire Protection Prevention Act, it does say that you can have a small confined fire and used for cooking purposes. So the big question is, a bylaw does not overrule the Fire Protection Prevention Act under the fire code, that you can still have a small fire used for cooking purposes. So it makes it very difficult to stop burning completely, because one city, as you've watched the news, did that, and now they're reviewing it all because of the confrontations they've been involved in, and they're probably going to go back to allowing small recreational fires again and cooking fires. So it can become very confrontational if you go for public input in a bylaw that where you're trying to govern something. I do understand, yes, the public has a right to have their opinion, but I think you're going to open up one awful can of worms, and we'll be sitting a year from now and not have this bylaw in place.
Okay. I mean, I lean, as I said, I suppose it's part of the philosophical framework towards greater public consultation versus lesser. But that doesn't change the fact that I'm happy to hear the will of council and move forward. You know, it seems that there are a few councillors who would prefer that the fire department bring this to fruition, and that, you know, I guess we act as good elected representatives. If the citizens of North Perth are approaching us between now and the next meeting about this fire bylaw, that we represent their considerations fully. So I'm okay with that. Let's revise the resolution. Sadly, I'm not sure I can repeat what I said the first time because it's 10 after 10 at night. But maybe Deputy Clerk Beer, you were probably taking notes of what I had proposed as our resolution. And perhaps you can strike the part about public consultation from it to make it more palatable to members of council, so that what is happening is that staff is considering the suggestions that some on council have made tonight, and bringing back a revised text. Certainly, I hope proofread it as well. Let me just check in with Deputy Clerk Beer. You kind of got that? She's nodding her head. Okay, that's good. All right. So if council, any more comments before we consider that resolution? Well, maybe what we'll do is we'll get Deputy Clerk Beer to read it back to us before we can get a mover and seconder. But any more considerations that you want as we move this resolution forward? Okay. I'm not seeing anything. Are you, Clerk Beerfelds? Okay. So Deputy Clerk Beer, if you would read what you have, and maybe with the revision that we just suggested, so that we have a copy of that read into the record, so that everyone knows what they're going to consider here.
So I've got that. The Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives a report entitled Open Air Burn Bylaw for information, and that I'll be working on this to get it right, and further that a revised bylaw be come forward to council consideration, incorporating the revisions comments made by council, bringing back on August 5th for approval. It's not very pretty.
Okay. I think the general tone was there, the general thrust was there. Little wordsmithing will come forward, no doubt, in the final of that resolution, but I think you got the gist of it. I don't think I want to be totally directive to the fire chief in terms of implementing everything you heard from us as we talked about this tonight. Chief Smith, I think that you need to use your professional discretion as well. But there were some points for your consideration that could be applied in the bylaw, and I think you understand the tone of that. Okay, so let's get this on the floor then properly. Councillor Seiler, will you serve as the mover?
Yes, I'll move it.
Thank you. And Councillor Andreessen, will you serve as our seconder?
Yes, I'll second that motion.
Thanks. Any discussion or debate? All right, seeing none, let's have that vote.
I'm in favor.
Yeah, he's credit for me has gone down. I'm in favor as well.
I'm in favor as well. Thank you.
Councillor Anstead, thank you.
I'm in favor. I'm out.
I'm in favor.
Okay, Councillor Richardson, Councillor Rothwell, I heard.
I'm in
Counselor-
favor.
Councillor Behrens, Councillor Andreessen as well, I think I heard.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
I would also be in favor.
Councillor Johnston. I think, who are we missing? Are we missing anyone? I think we've got everyone. Okay, so with that, that's carried. Thank you, Council. Oof,
Thank you,
this
Council.
Thank you, Chief Smith, for all the work of you and Jason and team on this. We appreciate that. Hey, it's 10:15. That brings us to agenda item number 6 on our agenda. For item 6.1, councillors, are there any reports you would like to ask of staff or our committees? Usual procedure applies, ask in WebEx to speak and we'll work the speaking order. Clerk Bearfelds, are you seeing anything? We're not. Okay. We have received no additional items of correspondence beyond that we have been shared earlier in our consent agenda. That brings us to item 8 on our agenda, which allows council to consider and enact bylaws. We have tonight as item 8.1, a proposed bylaw authorizing an appointment of a citizen volunteer to the board of the Listowel BIA. Are there any questions or concerns before we entertain this resolution? We're not seeing any, so let's have a look at that then. The resolution I have reads bylaw number 79-2021, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 161-2018, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call on Councillor Anstead to be our mover for this one?
Yes, I would move that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Behrens, will you do the seconding honors?
Yes, I will second that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any discussion or debate? Let's have that vote.
I'm in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Seiler.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Richardson.
I'm in favor. Rothwell.
Councillor Rothwell. And we're missing one.
Councillor Johnston in favor.
Councillor Johnston, thank you. And with that, that's carried. Let's move to item 8.2. Council is asked to enact a bylaw to provide for a drainage works, this time truly the Holman Municipal Drain. Clerk Bearfelds, do we have any comments to make on this? She's shaking her head no. It's fairly straightforward. Time period has lapsed and it's time to go is what she says. So this is item, let me read the item, that bylaw number 59-2021, being a bylaw to provide for a drainage works, Holman Municipal Drain, be introduced, read, and considered read a third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Councillor Behrens, are you eligible for this one? Would you be our mover for it?
I believe I am. Yes, I would. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan, will you be our seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you very much. Any discussion or debate on that one? Let's have that vote.
I'm in favor.
Okay, Councillor Sawyer says yes.
Me too.
Councillor Richardson says yes.
Councillor Rothwell, yes.
Councillor Rothwell, he says yes. And Councillor Johnston?
Yes.
Yes, and so with that, it's carried, I believe. Thank you. Item 9, are there any councillors wishing leave to give notice of motion tonight? Fairfields, are we seeing anything there? Okay, let's move on then to item 10 on our agenda. For item 10.1, are there any announcements that would be of benefit to our community or that reflect well on North Perth at this time? If you'd like to join the speaking queue, do the usual through the WebEx chat interface. Are we seeing anything tonight? All right. I note that the Agricultural Society's fair is in good swing at this point, and glad for all that they have done for the community in creating this event under unusual circumstances. Certainly noted. We are now at agenda item number 11. There are no matters tonight for consideration in a closed session meeting of council. That means that we can also skip past item 12 on our agenda. We have no reports to offer because no meeting was held. Council, as a mandated good practice, acts near the end of its meeting agenda to confirm all of its actions and business of its meeting through what's called the confirmatory bylaw. I have a draft for that reads as follows. The bylaw number 85-2021 being a bylaw to confirm generally previous actions of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call on Councillor Richardson to be our mover for this one?
I will move that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rothwell, will you serve as our seconder?
Yes, I will.
Thank you very much. Any discussion or debate on that? Let's have that vote.
I'm in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. I think I heard Councillor Seiler chirp from the other room.
I'm in favor as well.
Thank you, Councillor Rothwell.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Johnston. And I think that's the whole batch. I think that the others are abstentions as a result of declarations earlier in the meeting. All right, thank you. That brings us to the adjournment point here. We have completed the deliberation and taken action on the business that did come before council. I have a motion to adjourn, which reads as follows: that the council meeting adjourns at 10:24 p.m. To meet again for general council business on Monday, August 9th, 3 weeks at 7 p.m. Can I call on Councillor Johnston to be our mover for that one?
Yes, I would move that.
Thank you. Councillor Seiler, will you be our seconder for that one?
Yes, I'll be seconder. Thank you.
Thank you. That is not debatable, so let's have that vote.
I'm in favor.
Thank you.
I'm in favor as well.
Okay, Councillor Anstead, Councillor Richardson, I've heard.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Rothwell, I've heard.
I'm in favor. Councillor Johnson.
Councillor Johnston, yeah. And Councillor Anstead, that brings us to the total. That motion is carried. Council, thank you for the meeting. We are now out of session. This meeting is adjourned, and we will meet in 3 weeks' time. Until then, enjoy the warmth, rain, enjoy what comes. Get your second vaccine if you haven't had it. Good night.